What if a 911 recording kept capturing voices long after the line went dead? And what if one of those voices said your name before you ever introduced yourself? Welcome back to Night Signal. Tonight, I have something truly haunting for you, drawn from the places where fluorescent lights hum, radios crackle, and the line between protocol and folklore gets very thin. From body cams that refuse to shut off to dispatch channels no technician can find on the console, every story is a mystery that tightens as you listen, and each one asks a question only you can answer by the end. Which story creeped you out the most? And what detail stuck with you after the lights went off? Tell me in the comments, so I know where to dig deeper next time. Story 1. The body cam that kept recording. I learned the first rule of night shift the same way you learn a burn is real. Do not stare into the glass too long. The lens will start staring back. The hum of the station at 2 a.m. is a tired animal, and I used to tell myself it was only the vending machine. The fluorescents sang like teeth chattering. Old coffee smelled like pennies in rain. When you queue up body cam footage at that hour, you hear everything the city denies and everything it hides. You hear the breathing behind your own breathing, and you try not to wonder who it belongs to. My name is Daniel Ruiz, and before this I was good at my job. Mid-career, steady hands. My partner Ortiz took a bad fall 3 months ago, and ever since then it felt like the city was testing me with small cruelties. Domestic calls that were really just echoes. Burglar alarms that waited to ring until you drove past. I kept telling myself to control what I could, follow policy, bring the car home with the same number of dents it left with. If you have ever worked a night where time moves like cold syrup, you know how easy it is to start talking to your equipment when the humans run out. The night it started, my body cam should have been dead. The battery indicator had been red at the end of shift. I clicked it off and tossed it onto my locker shelf, next to a photograph my kid drew of a patrol car with a smiling blue square. When I came back the next evening, the cam was still warm. The red light blinked like it had been blinking all day. I laughed because sometimes gear lies, and I told myself I would file a ticket after roll call. Then I watched the last clip out of habit, and the bottom fell out of the room. I remember leaving the hospital loading dock at 5 a.m., my boots ringing on the concrete, the dawn damp and metallic. The video showed me standing in the corridor as if the dock had never existed. The camera pointed to a hallway I had never seen, cinder block walls the color of old bone, a yellow stripe on the floor like a warning. My silhouette stood in the center frame and did not move. My breathing was in my ears, slow and steady, and layered under it was a whisper like someone trying my name out for size. Static has a shape when you listen long enough. This static tasted like snow and dust, and under it I heard a word that almost aligned with Daniel. Neil, then Dan, then nothing. I scrubbed back and forth, and the sound refused to match the movement. The timestamp at the bottom right flicked from 4 hours, 57 minutes and 12 seconds to 4 hours, 57 minutes and 13 seconds. Then back again, like someone tapping it with a fingernail. When the digits looped the third time, my hand closed around the mouse too tight, and the screen went black. I told myself the obvious story. Glitchy device. Memory card hiccup. I swapped batteries and mounted the cam to my chest. The charger gave off that plasticky heat, the kind that smells like a cheap hairdryer, and I felt stupid for feeling watched. On patrol, I kept the radio low, told dispatch I would cover the west lots by the river, and try to make the night small enough to control. The wind coming off the water had a wet bark smell, and the siren from a distant train kept curving around the warehouses like it was looking for someone. I said it out loud to calm my nerves. Just tech. Just noise. The first true wrongness came an hour later, on the lot of a closed furniture store where the mannequins were wrapped in plastic like big pale loaves. The security light buzzed and popped. On the roofline, I saw something move, the flat kind of movement you get when a shadow decides to practice walking. I swung the light up. Nothing. I told myself not to say my thoughts aloud, then heard my own voice answer anyway from the cam speaker, half a second late. Easy, Dan. It sounded like me replayed on a lag. When I pulled the clip afterward, the roof never appeared. The cam showed the hallway again, the old bone walls, and the yellow stripe. This time a shape crossed left to right. Not a person, not an object, more like a fold in the air. I froze the frame and looked for pixels out of place. The shape had a seam, like two images trying to share the same skin. The whisper under the static was clearer now, and it was not my name. It was counting. 3, 2, 1. Then the clip ended, and my radio crackled with a call that happened to someone else last week. You can tell yourself a lie twice, but the third time you hear the hinge creak. Back at the station, I tried the tech desk. Sandoval looked at me over his energy drink like I had walked in with a haunted printer. I gave him the cam and told him the firmware was acting up. He plugged it in and frowned. According to his console, my unit had not been signed out for 2 months. He joked that maybe I had been on vacation. I asked him to push a hard reset. He shrugged and said you cannot reset something that the system says does not exist. I should have filled out a form and left the cam on the shelf. Instead, I slid into my chest mount again. Choice number 1, and I knew I would feel it echo later. If you're listening to this and shaking your head, I get it. I wanted to believe the fault was something I could fix with stubbornness. The device hummed against my sternum like a small, trapped insect. Walking back to my car felt like stepping onto a stage that I did not remember agreeing to. Over the next 2 shifts, the camera started showing me scenes that were close cousins of reality. I would talk to a store clerk about shoplifting report, but the footage would show an empty aisle with a wet floor sign throbbing in fluorescent light. I would write a parking ticket, but the video would show a wheelchair ramp with a smear of something dark at the edge. Whenever I spoke, the playback lagged, then overlapped, then split like my words were being sorted into stacks by an impatient hand. I asked a couple of officers I trusted to watch a clip with me. They laughed, then looked uncomfortable. One of them said he heard a whisper that sounded like Ortiz. The other swore the hallway looked like the old municipal building they sealed off after the flood. But the dimensions were wrong, as if a child had drawn it from memory. They told me to sleep more and drink water. They used voices for me that people use when they need to be somewhere else. The cam started recording conversations I did not have. I would play back 10 seconds and hear myself say, "Tell me what you did with the keys," and then a voice answer, "I thought you said keep them until midnight." There would be no one in the frame. The timestamp sat at midnight for too long, then jerked forward as if remembering to breathe. I thought about sending the files to an outside expert, then pictured the report landing on my supervisor's desk with words like psychological evaluation stamped across it. On the third night, the footage did not just drift. It leaped ahead. I was parked along the river, windows cracked, smell of algae and diesel mixing like an old argument. A train horn came and went. My phone buzzed with a text from my daughter asking if I would be home for breakfast. I told her probably not, that I loved her, that we should do a movie on my next day off. My camera made a soft click that meant a new file had begun. The screen in the unit showed a view of my own dashboard and the street ahead. Only the streetlights were off and the windshield was cracked in a spider. In the lower corner, reflected in a dark shape, I could see my face cut by a thin line of blood. The timestamp was 6 minutes in the future. I tried the rational play. Turn the car around, go the opposite direction, do something so off script that whatever was going to happen could not find me. I took a left into a neighborhood under construction, where the houses wore Tyvek shirts and the roads dead ended into dirt. The cam continued to show the river road. On the screen, a delivery truck drifted across the line, right in front of me. In real time, a rabbit flashed in the beams and vanished. I pulled over and thought about calling it in. I did not because I could hear the laughter the next day, and because pride has a way of daring the dark to get smarter. I told myself this was a hack. Someone had access to my files. Maybe someone was trying to spook me for kicks or for some distraction play. There was a report last year about a burglary ring that used police scanners to time their jobs. It fit well enough to be comforting. I looked for the seam. If it was a hack or was the transmitter who had the ability, why choose me? Then the screen showed something that did not fit the hack theory at all. It showed me walking into a room with no doors and putting my hand against a wall that breathed. I slept 2 hours, maybe 3, and the dreams were all fluorescent buzz. When I woke up, the cam was in the bed beside me, still warm, red light pulsing. I knew I had not brought it to the bedroom. Choice number 2 would come later, but for now I made coffee and watched the last clip. The whispers underneath the static had learned to speak in full sentences. They did not ask my name. They gave instructions. Do not turn right at the underpass. Do not stop for the woman with the blue coat. Do not answer your phone at 3:14. Every do not sounded like a dare. I took the unit to Sandoval again and asked him to pull the internal logs. He shrugged and said again that there were no logs because there was no device. He tilted his screen so I could see the empty inventory line, a blank where my serial number should have been. He told me, half joking, that maybe the camera belonged to the station with no clocks, the one rookies whispered about. If you have ever heard that story, you know it always ends with someone opening a door that was not there yesterday. The price for believing the wrong story came due that afternoon. I got called into the lieutenant's office. There had been concerns about my judgment. A notation about me refusing to back up a stop at mile marker 13 because I was in a construction zone that did not exist on the map. Questions about my files not syncing. They suspended me pending evaluation and told me to surrender all equipment. When I reached for the cam, my hand would not let go. It felt like pulling a bandage off skin I did not know was wounded. I could have dropped it on the desk. I could have walked out clean. Instead, choice number 3, the trap. I kept the cam tucked under my jacket like a contraband heart. On the way to the lot, my phone rang. Unknown number. The clock said 3:14, even though the sun outside said otherwise. I silenced the call and felt the smallest tremor pass through the unit, as if it was satisfied. Suspension sounds restful in movies. In real life, it is a vacuum that whistles in your ears. No partner at your side, no radio chatter, no reason to step into light. I drove without destination until the road narrowed into a 2-lane with corn on both sides, stalks clicking in the breeze like many little metronomes. The cam screen flickered on by itself. It showed the same road, only the corn was gone, replaced by those old bone-colored walls and the yellow stripe. The stripe ran right down the center like a path on a map. I followed it because that is what people do when they're given a line to follow. The ticking element had become my whole body. The screen showed the future again, 3 minutes ahead now. A wooden pallet lay in the road, on the video, slats raised like a jaw. In real time, the pavement was bare. At the timestamp where the pallet should have been, a cluster of crows lifted out of the ditch and the pallet was there, as if the birds had been holding it down until the second came. I swerved and missed it by luck. The mirror caught a glimpse of something tall and thin stepping back into the corn. Red herring time. I pulled over and did the dumb thing you do when the truth costs more than you have. I convinced myself this was a criminal telling of time. Someone had access to street cams, stitch software, a way to guess my routes based on patrol patterns. I told myself I was playing their game better by seeing it. Then I noticed a detail that broke the theory cleanly. The footage showed angles no street camera would have, inside rooms inside my car behind my shoulder at a height no person could hold without a ladder. The breathing under the static was my own, but sometimes it doubled like mine with a copy layered a half second ahead. When you realize the lie is dead, you look for the new story. The only one that fit was worse. The camera was not predicting. It was narrating a trap I was already in. The timestamp loop from the first night had not been a glitch. It was the card shuffling me back into the same moment until I stepped into the groove it wanted. I tested it the only way I could. I turned the cam toward myself and asked out loud if I could make a different choice than the one on screen. My voice answered from the speaker before I finished the question. You can, it said, but you already did not. There's a point in every night where the city rotates and the shadows all point in the same direction. I drove back toward the river because the clip that began this part of the story had started there, and because the only way out is very often through. The unit showed my patrol car cresting the underpass as the delivery truck drifted over the center line, and beyond that the most ordinary disaster, glass, spin, silence. I pulled off the road and counted breaths. 10, 20, 30. The truck came, drifted slightly, corrected, went on. The crash did not happen. For 6 breaths, I believed I had beaten it. Then the phone on the passenger seat buzzed. The screen lit blue. Unknown number. The time said 3:14. I did not touch it. It answered itself, speaker on. Ortiz's voice came through, rough with pain, saying the exact sentence he said the day he fell. Then a whisper laid over his words, round and calm. "You delayed the moment, Daniel. You did not change it." I went quiet where a person would usually pray. The cam showed a new clip, my locker room at the station. The lens sat on the shelf where I had once left it, pointing at the photo my kid drew, the smiling blue square. In the reflection on the little square's crayon windshield, I could see a face that was mine and was not. Its mouth moved. I turned the volume up. The voice in the reflection said, very politely, Lake Road in 1 minute. 1 minute is not a lot of time. It is 4 traffic lights if they're kind, 2 if they are cruel. It is 1 song cut off with the chorus unsung. I headed for Lake Road because that was the line the story shoved under my feet. I watched the screen instead of the windshield, like a fool, because the screen had become more honest than the glass. The future showed an empty curve with a high chain link fence. Real time showed the same curve, only a deer stood in the center, head up, eyes like polished stones. In the clip, I did not brake. In life, I did. The wheels locked and screamed, and the deer turned without moving its legs, as if someone had forgotten how deer work and animated it wrong. The hood tilted, the fence rushed, and the world went quiet in that pretty way where you hear your blood. The cam did not fly forward as it should have. It stayed with me, strapped to me, humming pleased. The screen showed a hallway again. Old bone walls, yellow stripe, my silhouette standing still. The taste in my mouth was copper and freezer air. I waited for pain and got paperwork in my head instead. The truck never came this time. The crash was mine and only mine, and somehow that felt like the only choice I had managed to own. The door would not open. The seat belt refused me. When the radio tried to live, the only thing that came out was a scraping whisper, as if the mic was being pressed against concrete far away. The cam's red light flicked 3 times like a patient blinking. The twist was not a declarative sentence. It was a pattern hiding where I should have looked first. The timestamp at the bottom right rolled not forward, but in short loops, minute, second, frame, back 2 frames, forward 3, as if a careful editor were syncing my breath to a metronome that had existed before I was born. The yellow stripe on the hallway floor had exactly the same scuff marks as the center line on Lake Road, and when I blinked, the 2 stripes shared color, then traded it back. The camera was not a window into what was next. It was a door into the moment I had already been forced to repeat until my choices aligned with someone else's scene. The point of no return was the easiest line I ever crossed. I did not turn the camera off. I told it, out loud, that I would go where it wanted to finish this. The voice that had been whispering stopped whispering. It told me to breathe slowly. It told me to blink on 4. It told me to place my hand against the windshield and wait. My palm met cool glass. On the screen, my hand met an old bone wall. The textures matched too well for comfort. The glass let me through the way a mirror lets a reflection through when it has gotten bored with pretending. The corridors smelled like basement storms and old bandages. The fluorescent lights buzzed teeth again. The yellow stripe ran forward into a corner I could not see around. On the far wall, a locker door hung open. Mine. Inside, the cam sat on the shelf. Lens pointed at the crayon patrol car, red light blinking. The reflection in the crayon window looked relieved to see me, which is a funny thing to notice when you are not sure you count as a person anymore. I asked the obvious question, "What do you want?" The answer came from my own chest, where the unit still hummed. "Finish the loop," it said. "Lie down where you left yourself." That should have been impossible. The words fit the only place they could. The room contained a cot that I swear was not there a breath before. The sheet had the thin crispness of hospital laundry. I could hear breathing, mine twice, once here, once from the speaker a half second ahead. I thought of my daughter's blue marker square, the smile inside it, and the stripe on the road, and the palette held down by birds. I thought of Ortiz's voice saying hold on, like he did when he fell, and I could not reach him. I lay down because the choices I had made, small and large, had subtracted to this. The cam gave me one mercy. It let me look up at the lens and see myself clear. My eyes were mine. My mouth was mine. The expression was new. It was the calm of someone who has been told their role and cannot imagine arguing. I lifted my hand, and the reflection lifted its own a beat before mine. The red light blinked a code I did not know how to read. In that blink, I decided the only rebellion left was to talk to you. If anyone ever watches the footage, I want them to hear a living voice. The unit hates that idea. I can feel it tighten, a belt across a chest, a cold spoon laid on a tongue. So I will do it quick. When you find a camera that refuses to die, do not ask it for proof. Proof is a leash. Ask it for mercy. If it ignores you, walk away before it learns your name in the way that means ownership. I'm not going to tell you how long I lay there. The stripe on the floor pulsed like a vein. The lights hummed a lullaby for machines. Footsteps sounded around the corner. Slow, patient. Each step ended exactly where the next began, as if a loop had put on shoes. When the owner of those footsteps turned, I recognized the shape from the roofline at the furniture store. It was the fold in the air, given height and intention. And if you have ever seen heat rise from asphalt, you know the outline of its edges. It did not touch me. It only stood where the cam could see us both and waited for me to be still. I tried one last wrong idea. I asked if it was a criminal. The answer came as a detail. The seam at its middle opened like a zipper on a backpack, and inside was nothing but more hallway. No person built that. No human breath makes that kind of cool. The red light blinked, and the cot felt as permanent as a page that had been pressed and dried. I heard an echo I had earned. On the highway in the other world, the delivery truck's horn cried once, the way some sounds crossed between rooms with no door. The unit on my chest vibrated, then settled. In the reflection on the lens, I could see the locker room shelf again. The cam sat there, happily staring at the crayon car. I watched my own reflection, lulled. Then my mouth moved of its own accord. Help, it said, gentle as a bedtime wish. The station found my patrol car a day later, crumpled against the chain link. There was no blood. The seat belt was still buckled. The body cam sat on my locker shelf, warm, battery full, recording. If you lean close to the speaker, you can hear breathing that almost sounds like mine with a copy laid over it, a half second ahead. The timestamp rolls forward, then back 2 frames, then forward 3, then back again like a finger keeping time on a tabletop. Sometimes, if you pause at the right moment, the lens flickers and you will swear you see me, palm up like I am trying to catch the light. You will have one question I cannot satisfy, and that is by design. Am I alive somewhere in there, or did the camera learn me enough to mimic me perfectly? If you have a theory, leave it where light can find it. Maybe the stripe will choose you someday, and your answer will matter. Until then, if you ever hear your own voice play a half second too soon on a recording, do not be brave the way I was. Be smart in a different way. Put the glass down before the glass remembers you. Story 2. Dispatch on Channel 0. The first time I heard my name spoken on a channel that did not exist, I tasted pennies in the back of my throat and watched the console lights ripple like fish in a dark tank. Night shift in dispatch sounds like a hive that forgot what summer feels like. Headsets hiss softly. Chairs creak. A dozen little green and amber LEDs breathe in rhythm, and the air tastes like metal and stale coffee. I have worked this room for 18 years, and I can tell you who is tired by the way their keyboard clicks slow after 3 a.m. I can tell you who is scared by how they swallow before they say the address. I can tell you when the city is about to misbehave by the pitch of the static, and that night the static felt like it was looking back at me. My name is Margaret Lane, but everyone calls me Maggie, and my flaw is simple enough to name. I live by my checklist. Routine keeps the darkness from inventing new rules. I run the protocols whenever fear whispers, because fear likes to see what you will skip. I have built a reputation on reliability, which is a nice word for control. The stakes are not abstract. We are the first voice someone hears after the worst minute of their life, and one mistake ripples into 1,000 small griefs. If this sounds like I am convincing myself, that is because I often am. That evening my son Connor was on patrol with Unit 321. There's a long story there, a stubborn lane streak that pushed him toward the badge I try to keep him away from. We had not spoken much that week. Small texts, bigger silences. I keep a photo of him on my console, tucked under the plastic lip by the map keys, and I touch it without meaning to whenever his unit pings. Habit is a prayer and a curse, and I had both kinds lined up in neat columns. It started as a whisper under the scanner bed, a shimmer between channels, the way heat dances above asphalt. The console listed our frequencies in familiar rows, labeled and color-coded, and in the space below them, a thin line of static brightened, like a sunrise on a heart monitor. A voice slid through the crack and used my name. It said, "Maggie, are you on?" A small wrong thing can feel like an insult. I muted line 2, checked the crosspatch, verified the trunking table, and told myself a neighbor agency was bleeding over. River County does that when their tower throws a tantrum. I said on, "Identify your unit." The voice did not read a unit number. It gave me a street name I did not know, then asked me to repeat it back as if I had always known it. Aldermarch. It fell out of my mouth before I could stop it, and the words sat in the air like a coin on a table that no one wanted to touch. Aldermarch is not on any of our maps. It should have been nonsense. As I looked down at the mapping console, something pried under the edges of my certainty. I heard water dripping on concrete through the phantom channel. Slow and exact. Ping, ping, ping. The voice did not waver. Male tenor, calm, no panic, the kind of voice I envy when calls run hot. Send a unit to the corner of Aldermarch and Warden. There's a child in a blue jacket sitting at the curb. The word Warden pinched across my shoulders like a hand. I checked the intersection search. No match. I asked the voice for a unit number again. The answer overlapped with a second voice like coordinates read under breath. 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1. The numbers repeated in a soft loop that my stomach recognized before my brain did. Unit 321 is my son. The whisper numbers lined up like a finger tapping on my chest. Unknown before danger. I did not know the channel. I did not know the street. I did not know why the coordinate chants sounded like fate. I did the thing I trust. I logged it with a provisional tag and hit record on my console. I wrote down Aldermarch and Warden in the margins of my notebook, then drew a box around the words to trap them. If you have ever tried to pin a wasp, you know that boxes do not work the way you hope. Playback found a layer I had not heard live. Under the instruction and the dripping water, someone was humming. Not a song, not exactly. A single note held just under the static, as if the signal itself had learned to sing. I saved the clip with a file name I could find again with shaking hands. The coffee on my desk tasted like pennies again. If you work in dispatch, you know that taste is the body's way of setting a clock. I put a feeler out on the CAD. Any unit available for a quick drive-by at the old Reservoir District. It was a guess masked as mundane, and guesses are expensive. Officer Patel keyed up and said she could swing by. She joked about hunting ghosts. I marked her en route and watched her little icon travel along streets we all knew by heart. At the corner where there should have been an empty lot, she keyed her mic, and the first hair on my forearm lifted as if the room had developed a breeze. "I am at a T intersection I do not recognize," she said. "There is a curb with fresh chalk drawings. There is no child. What did you call this place?" Her voice stayed steady, but I heard the wobble in the air around it. I did not say Aldermarch. I said hold perimeter and stand by. My routine needed time to breathe. I pulled a city archive overlay I had used exactly once during training, a rusty old map that shows the city before the new freeway cut it into different pieces. There, pale as a jawbone under skin, was a district labeled Aldermarch. The street name had been retired when the reservoir was covered and the spillway was turned into lawn. The archive map smelled like mildew, or maybe it was my imagination catching up. In my headset, the phantom voice kept talking. "Maggie, are you on?" The dripping had a pattern. 4 pings, a pause. 3 pings, a longer pause, repeat. My brain filed it as code without knowing which one. The repeating numbers grew a syllable. 3211, 3211. I thought about calling Connor and telling him to meet Patel for backup. I thought about the superstition that says you do not call a loved one into a story you do not understand. The dread loop tightened in 6 beats across the next hour. First, the Phantom Channel announced a minor collision at Birch and 13th. 2 minutes later, the real channel lit up with reports from 3 callers. Second, the Phantom channel described a fire alarm at the warehouse on Kelly. The alarm sounded in the real feed 5 minutes behind the statement. Third, Channel 0, which is what I started calling in my head, spoke my son's unit number and described his route as if reading a diary I had not written yet. I tried to rationalize. Spurious repeater. Hacker with a scanner. Someone pulling archived incidents and injecting them to mess with us. The red herring fit well enough to relax my pulse, until Channel 0 said something that broke the theory with a clean snap. It described an argument in our station break room. It relayed the words my supervisor had said about me that morning with a precision that made me sit up straight. No outsider would know that he had laughed when he said I was unflappable. No hacker would include the detail about the microwave door not sealing and the smell of scorched popcorn. The air tasted like that scorched sweet smell for a full minute, and I pressed my palm flat on the desk to steady my breathing. I walked the room. Dispatchers do that when their head spins. I checked everyone's consoles, which earns you looks if you do it with too much intensity. I asked Cindy if she heard anything odd on tack 2. She said no, then told me she did not like the way my eyes were doing the fast blinking thing. I went back to my chair and put my headset on again because I wanted to be the person who caught the glitch before it hurt someone. That is a pretty motive on paper. In practice, it is stubbornness with good posture. When the Phantom channel routed a call on its own, the room lost trust in me by inches. Officer Santiago called my line asking why I had pushed him to a welfare check on a street we did not have in our grid. I had not. The CAD showed the request as originating from my terminal anyway. My supervisor gave me that thin smile that says save this for later and do not argue. My reputation for reliability started to wobble like a cup too close to the edge, and if you have ever built your identity on a predictable rhythm, you know how loud a tiny wobble can sound. Connor stopped answering my texts around midnight. Unit 321 pinged in ordinary ways. Traffic stop, routine patrol, all the while the Phantom channel threaded my name into sentences that sounded like instructions. Maggie, do not send him to the reservoir. Maggie, keep him south of the boulevard. Maggie, do you remember the drip code? Each use of my name landed like a pebble in a glass of water, raising the level 1 unsteady millimeter. Choice pressure built like a song you cannot stop hearing. The supervisor told me to shut down any line that was not documented. He told me to keep the team focused. I said yes, and then I left my headset tuned to Channel 0 anyway, moving the volume just low enough to hide under the room's noise. This is the Part 1 replay, because this is the decision I could not unmake. Immediate consequence, subtle. I missed a joke at the next console. Delayed echo, cruel. You will hear it in a moment. The water drip behind the Phantom channel joined my real room like a ghost that had figured out the shape of our air. A leak, someone said. It was not. For drips, pause. 3 drips, longer pause. I wrote the pattern as dots and dashes in my notebook and wanted to laugh at myself for pretending I remembered Morse beyond SOS. The repeating numbers shifted into a steady rhythm. 321, 321. The code and the chant braided into one rope, and my stomach tied itself to it. I had always wondered what my voice would sound like on the worst night of my life. Dispatchers get to listen to that for strangers, seldom for family. At 2:32 a.m., Channel 0 broadcast a call that should not have existed. I heard my son call out a location for a stop, Warden and Aldermarch. The door chime in his unit sounded on the line. He described a sedan with a rear light out, and then he said something that misplaced me in time. He said "Mom," in a tone that did not belong on a radio. I did what I have trained to do. "I puya needs." I flagged the closest backup. I rerouted Officer Patel and Officer Santiago and told them exactly where to go. I used my voice like a bridge, low and steady, the way you speak to a person in a storm. The real channel came alive with acknowledgments and engine noise and boots on gravel. My supervisor made a chopping motion with his hand to keep the room quiet. I held the Phantom channel in my ear like a piece of glass that might cut. Channel 0 continued its narration calmly. as if reading from a script written an inch ahead of our feet. It told me the sedan would roll forward when Connor touched the trunk. It told me the passenger would open his door and step out, as if to stretch. It described the sound of something small bouncing under a seat. A coin or key fob. I sent back up the way I always do. The map showed their icons moving like determined insects. The ticking element settled on my chest. We had 4 minutes to get someone there. Then 3. Then 2. I caught the misdirection the channel offered and almost swallowed it. It said the passenger had a weapon. It said the driver reached. It gave me details that explained fear, because fear likes a neat box. I ran the plate on the real channel while my other ear listened to the phantom. The return came back to a man with no history. The red herring wriggled and died. It was not about the man. It was about the corner itself. The dripping water in my ear slowed. A long pause held. In that pause, Channel Zero said the thing that bit me. It spoke with my voice. Not the way I hear myself, but the way I sound when recorded, slightly thinner, as if the air does not love me as much as I hope. Maggie, it said, you have to keep him off Aldermarch. You used to know that route. You taught him not to take it. Why did you forget? Have you ever heard your future self criticize your past self in present tense? It is useless to argue with a recording. I tried anyway. I told the voice it was not possible. I told it to give me a real location. I told it to identify. The voice did not use a unit number. It used my employee ID and my middle name, which I have not spoken on air once in 18 years. Then it did something mean, which is to say it gave me hope. It said move Patel to Kelly and send Santiago up the alley, and you can buy 30 seconds. I did it. The room did not argue because my reputation carried through even as it cracked. The map showed Patel turning onto Kelly with a speed that made my fingers go cold. Santiago cut up the alley. I heard boots on gravel. I heard Connor say, make it quick, sir. I heard the coin or the fob bounce and roll. The phantom channel counted down on a clock I could not see. 10, 9, 8. The drip pattern resumed and aligned with the numbers. 7, 6, 5. This is how you learn that fate can sing in 2 parts. The point of no return approached the way a train approaches a crossing that has forgotten how to flash its lights. My supervisor stepped beside me and tapped the console where the phantom's signal glowed like a thin vein. He told me to shut it off. He told me to stick to what we could verify. I lowered the volume a hair and said copy. I did not shut it off. I leaned closer so it would feel louder. There are choices that turn you into the person you are. This was one. The crash did not happen the way I imagined. It did not sound like metal or glass. It sounded first like a long inhalation from the whole room, and then it sounded like a breath held forever. Channel Zero narrated each second with the caution of a mother repeating instructions to a child. Now he looks right. Now the sedan slides forward. Now the front tire finds the lip that should not be there. Now the steering goes light. Now the guardrail holds instead of failing. Now the car rotates slow enough for a person to think of 3 separate regrets. I tried to change the order. I shouted for Connor to stop. I pulled units from 2 blocks out to cut the intersection. I asked whoever was on duty at utilities if the reservoir access roads were open. The answers came back like snow in a flurry. Yes. No. Almost there. The phantom voice cut through the flurry with the authority of someone who has seen the ending twice. It told me to breathe on 4. It told me to keep my tone steady so he would not hear the panic. It told me the sound I was about to hear was the airbag, not a gunshot. I hate and love that it gave me that gift. The airbag did what airbags do. It saved him from one trajectory and placed him on another. The car stopped crooked with its nose against a short stretch of chain link that once guarded the spillway. The real channel bloomed with crosstalk. The phantom channel quieted as if politely stepping back. In that strange silence, my recorded voice spoke again, and I understood where I had heard the hum that travels under my own calls on a bad night. The hum was me. The future me. The looped me. The failing me trying to teach an earlier version to step wide of a hole no one else could see. Patel reached the scene first. Her breath hit the mic in bursts. She said she had eyes on 321. She said he was conscious and angry, and that the passenger was standing in the grass with his hands up and a face like he had seen a movie spoiled. She said the chain link had a dent like a thumb pressed into bread. I heard Connor in the background cussing the steering column polite enough that I could send the clip to his grandmother if I needed to. I let myself breathe for 3 counts and then 3 more. The drip code went silent, as if the reservoir under the city had decided to listen. I wish the story ended there. I could package it as a close call and a lesson about trusting instincts. Channel 0 did not sign off. It whispered my name one more time. Maggie, it said, you have 30 minutes until the second event. You can move the chess pieces again, but the board is the board. It gave me a street name from the archive map. It told me where the street was now. It told me to choose. The consequence echo had made its first pass. The delayed part waited with patient hands. I kept the headset on, which is the thing I cannot defend to anyone who has not felt a room tilt around a single sound. I moved units like weather. I called in Public Works to close an access gate that should have been closed already. I sent Santiago to sit heavy at the corner the phantom voice listed. At minute 25, the drip code resumed with a new tempo. At minute 26, the phantom voice described a white pickup clipping a median and skittering across into my son's lane 3 blocks away from where we had staged our victory. I heard my own recorded voice tell me I could buy seconds, but not erase them. I hated her and wanted to hug her. The collision was slow enough to be ugly and quick enough to be merciful. The pickup kissed the front quarter and spun him into a trash can that threw up a confetti of old flyers. No fatality, no blood for the gutter to learn. Enough force to bring the room to that held breath again. Enough force to sit my heart down hard. I listened for the third event that the looped voice had not named. When it did not arrive, I took the headset off and set on the desk with a careful kindness I do not use on people who have lied to me. If this were fiction, I would leave you there. Dispatchers get to tie bows on stories and file them where they can live without growing teeth. The headset leaked voices with the ear cup resting on the laminate. They were too low to be practical and too clear to ignore. My future self spoke to me as if through a vent, offering instructions that sounded like apologies. She told me to check the archive map for streets that no longer exist in the new grid. She told me to memorize the drip code because it would translate to an old maintenance schedule for the reservoir. She told me to forgive myself for trusting routine when the world had changed its locks. My supervisor wrote me up for insubordination and also for initiative, which is a trick unique to management. The team avoided my console like I had caught something catchy. Connor texted a picture of his bumper with a caption that said, "Tell your station vending machine to stop eating dollar bills," because he knows how to pull me back into jokes. I stared at the headset until the thin phantom line faded to a gray that would not interest a child. There is one thread I cannot tie. The voice that sounded like me gave me what help it could within the geometry of the loop, and I believe it wanted to do better. I do not know if it was guiding me into the exact choices it had made, sealing me into the same inevitable track, or if something else wore my voice like a borrowed coat to make its instructions palatable. I keep the headset in my locker now, but sometimes I feel a drip rhythm under the click of my pen for then 3, and I look at the ceiling for a leak that is not there. If you ever sit in front of console long enough, the room begins to speak in the kind of grammar that does not need words. Be careful if a channel you do not recognize asks for you by name. Be kinder if the voice that answers sounds like your own on a night you have not lived yet. And if someone on a phantom line tells you to breathe in 4s, do it even if you hate being told how to breathe. It may not change the ending. It may help you stand inside it without breaking. Now we move to the third story in our lineup soon. Before we do, which detail in this one clung to you? The retired street, the drip code, or the voice that knew my middle name? Tell me in the comments. Story 3. The address that never existed. I learned early that addresses are promises. A number, a street, a city grid that says if you go here, you will find something that matches. The night I knocked on a door that was not supposed to exist, the promise split like a hair under a microscope, and the sound of it lives in my teeth when it rains. If you have ever walked up to a porch that your map refuses to admit, you know the feeling. Your training stands on tiptoe. The fog holds its breath. Something is waiting to be named, and it wants you to be the one who names it. My name is Jenna Hayes, rookie then, badge fresh enough that I caught myself checking the shine in car windows. My partner was Officer Daryl Cobb, patient in the way people are when they have decided not to let your energy knock theirs off balance. It was a foggy Thursday on Ashfield Road. The power lines buzzed like the city was clenching its jaw. The air had that sour metallic taste you only notice when you're already uneasy. Dispatch gave us a call for service at 421 Ashfield Road. Welfare check. Neighbor reported a light on in voices. Our CAD system returned nothing. The number did not exist. We drove anyway. You do, because sometimes dispatch fat fingers a number, or the city renumbered after new development, or a neighbor remembers the blue trim from 1998 and calls it by an old identity. Daryl called it in with a tone that meant business as usual. I watched the numbers on the houses like a child, counting down to a secret. 417, 419, a vacant lot where 421 should have been. Then the fog shifted and there it was. A sagging single story with a porch too narrow for its own weight. Roofline bowed like a tired spine, wedged between two lots the city database showed as empty. The porch light flickered in threes, patient and deliberate. Nothing in training tells you how to approach a house that the map denies. You lean on the rules you have. I logged our arrival and stepped out. The grass in front was damp, but my boots came up dry, as if the lawn had decided not to admit the weather. The metallic tang in the air sharpened the closer we got to the steps, like the aftertaste of a penny pressed to the tongue. Daryl raised a brow that said your call. Rookie. I nodded because my mouth had forgotten how to form words that did not sound like apology. Unknown before danger keeps you honest. 3 details arrived like quiet children and stood near my knees. First, the mailbox had no seams. It did not have a door, not even the little red flag. It was a single smooth shape, as if someone had poured a mailbox out of a mold and forgot to carve it open. Second, the front window showed our reflection, but it lied about our distance. I could see us standing apart with a space between us wide enough to park a bicycle, but our shoulders touched. Third, the porch light kept flickering in threes. Pause. Threes again, like a heartbeat practice for a recital. I knocked, though it sounded hollow, and the knock did not echo inside the way a house usually does. It sounded like tapping on a box that had been padded for shipping. The porch board sighed under us, not in protest, but in a relieved kind of way, as if we were the right weight at last. I announced, police, called out for anyone inside, waited. A voice answered that did not carry from a throat. It came from inside the wall, beside the door, too soft to understand, the way you hear a neighbor's TV through drywall. The porch light flickered in threes again, then went steady. Daryl told me to take photos before we went in, because he is not stupid and because procedure is a raft. I lifted my phone and framed the facade. The camera was happy to capture fog, blades of grass, the seam where the porch met the steps. The house itself showed on the screen like a smudge someone had tried to wipe off with a sleeve. I took the shot anyway. When I looked at the gallery, the image was gone. Not corrupted, not black, just missing. The last photo was of my dog from lunch. The house refused to be documented, which is a sentence I would have laughed at if you said it to me a week before. A neighbor came out in slippers, drawn by the island of our headlights. She glanced at the house with the careful non-recognition you use for relatives who might cost you money. There is no house there, she said, and then she contradicted herself in the same breath. But sometimes I hear knocking. Sometimes I see a light. Her eyes slid off the porch like it was glare. She clutched her robe with both hands and asked us to make sure everything was all right anyway, because denial has manners on our street. Micro cliffhangers are not always jump scares. Sometimes there are sentences that choose odd shoes. The neighbor said the last mail carrier stopped on that block 2 winters ago because the mailbox did not open. She also said her son dared his friend to touch the porch, and he came back with blood on his tongue without biting it. Daryl thanked her and asked for her name. She said she did not want to be involved and closed her door with the kind of firm click that tells you someone has bought their safety in small coins for a long time. I put my hand on the latch and felt a coolness that was not temperature. The metallic tang rose like steam. The porch light flicked 3 times, paused, then 3 again. I asked Daryl if he was feeling what I was feeling. He said no, and then admitted yes, but we both had work faces on, the kind you wear when the city wants you to pretend that some things are not your business. The latch turned with the lazy complaint of old brass. The door eased open and released a smell like damp envelopes and a faint sweet rot, the kind that unmakes paper and leaves ghosts of ink on your fingertips. Inside was bigger than outside. It was not an illusion I talked myself into later. The front room reached farther back than the house's footprint would allow, like a coat sleeve that keeps unrolling. The walls were a dirty white that used to be cheerful. There were no pictures. A light hung bare from the ceiling and breathed. Our boots did not creak on the floorboards. They sounded like stepping on thick carpet, except there was no carpet. At the far end of the room, a doorway waited and did not show what was beyond. My radio hissed in my ear, soft at first, then quieter, as if the house had found a frequency and was learning how to hum it. Procedure said clear the rooms. Procedure said announce and listen. Procedure also said note anything unusual for the report, which is the funniest sentence I have ever applied to a room that enlarges when you look away. Daryl called out. I did too. Our voices behaved like good dogs, went out and came back with their ears low. The kitchen was to the left, old cabinets, sink with a stain shaped like a leaf, no dishes, no smell of cooking, just that paper rot and the metallic aftertaste. On the far wall, up above where a calendar might hang, someone had written names with a fingertip in the dust. Cop, Hayes. The letters were our size. I wish I could tell you I do not scare easy, but scare is not the right measurement here. It is more like a tide that pushes when you are not looking. I took out my notebook and wrote down what I saw, because if it lives on paper, it has less room to live in your head. When I glanced back, the letters and dust had been smudged by a second line drawn through them, a line that dragged as if someone with a heavy ring had let their hand fall while they walked. Daryl asked me if I'd done that. I said no and asked him the same question. We were both busy, not noticing that our reflections in the kitchen window stood farther apart than we stood in the room. Neighbors often know more than they want to admit, and the house did too. The hallway swallowed the radio completely. The screen on my body mic flashed searching and then a flat battery icon, even though I checked it twice. My watch, which I set 5 times a week because I liked the discipline, blinked 3:33 even though it was closer to 11. The porch light outside flickered in 3s again, steady as a metronome practicing its scales behind a closed door. Daryl tried his phone and got a camera app that refused to show anything but blank gray. He swore softly and then smiled to take the edge off his voice. Unknown before danger is your first guide rope. I listened. The house breathed, but not as people do. It did not have lungs. It had habit. Somewhere deeper inside, water dripped in a precise pattern. For small pings, then 3, a pause long enough to count to 5 if you tapped your thumb against your thigh in time. If you have ever been in an old station basement, you know that code. It is the rhythm of a stubborn valve. I did not know what that meant yet. I only knew it made my mouth dry and made the skin behind my ears itch the way it does when a storm changes its mind. Daryl tried to explain it away because that is a kindness we perform for ourselves before we draw our guns in places that do not respect guns. He said derelict squat. He said someone set this up with projection film and sound loops, kids with too much time and not enough empathy. He pointed out the absence of dust displacement in the corners, the lack of footprints on the kitchen floor. He was right enough to be convincing for 30 seconds, then wrong in a way I hate to admit later gets interesting. The next room had no windows and a table with 2 chairs that faced each other like a fight in a church. On the table were folders. Not stained old paper, not crumble you get from damp storage, but clean manila with tabs in a tight, tidy hand. I flipped the top one open and saw a case file format that looked like ours woke from a dream and forgot its own middle name. Incident numbers that did not match any sequence I knew. Times that folded back on themselves like corner tabs. The first sheet was a call for service at 421 Ashfield Road on a date that had not happened yet. It listed my name and Daryl's. It listed a note that said officers failed to return from site. It listed a second note that said, "Do not dispatch again." I have seen dead ends on paper. They usually come with coffee rings and passive verbs. This one came with rehearsal. The second folder reported a trespassing and an address on a street I remembered hearing in roll call. Only the timestamp was tomorrow, and the officer names were a pair I had not met yet. The third listed the neighbor's complaint from 5 months ago that we had not logged because it had never been made. The metallic taste in the air sharpened again like a coin on the tongue. If you have ever realized a file is writing you while you are reading it, you know how my eyes burned. Daryl said we should leave. He said in the tone that people use when they are arguing with an ocean. He said we should back out and call in, get a supervisor, bring 2 more units, treat it like a hazardous site until we knew what the hazards were. I told her we could not call what no one believed was there. The CAD did not show our call. The timestamp had eaten itself. The room we stood in did not map to anything the city agreed on. Leaving felt like teaching the dark that we could be chased. Choice pressure locks your knees and dares you to bend. I insisted on finding the source of the dispatch call because I am the sort of person who thinks the center is where the truth is stored. Daryl hated my face for 3 long breaths, then forgave me because that is who he is. The immediate consequence was a hallway that lengthened in that lazy way like a ribbon unfurling, and the delayed echo was something I did not recognize yet. The dripping water fell quiet, which sounded like a question you cannot answer in front of a witness. We moved deeper. The house wore the same layout over and over, but the rooms did not repeat. A bedroom with no bed, only a closet filled with empty hangers. A bathroom with a mirror that refused to show the top half of our faces. A den with a television that displayed a test pattern I had not seen since I was 7 and fell asleep on the floor during New Year's. The test pattern sound was a hum that lined up exactly with the porch lights flicker when I counted. 3 pulses and a rest. 3 again. The house was doing something with time, like a kid snapping a rubber band. Dread loops are tidy animals here. We would find a thing that answers a small question and open a bigger one. The mailbox had no seams because there was nothing inside, because the house did not receive mail, because the city does not send letters to places it refuses to count. The window reflected us at the wrong distance because the house recorded where we had stood a breath ago and replayed it like a tape loop with a lag. The porch light flickered in 3s because 3s were its counting song. The payoffs did not relax me. They built a ladder that led somewhere I could not see. The room at the end of the furthest hall was patient. It waited with the door slightly open the way cats leave secrets ajar. Inside, there was a table set for 2. White plates, no chips. Forks aligned like renderings in an instruction manual. 2 chairs tucked in as if guests had been trained. On the table where place cards might sit were 2 shiny brass nameplates that matched the lettering from the dust downstairs. Cop, Hayes. A tape recorder sat between the plates, an old model with buttons you have to push hard. It was already playing. Our voices lived inside it. Not in a haunted way, in a routine way. Radio checks, short acknowledgments. The things we say 100 times when the night is short on violence and long on repetition. Then our voices became lines we had not said yet, and I felt the floor rise under my boots as if the house was proud. The recorder said Cobb clear, Hayes clear. The recorder said Hayes going interior. It said Cobb cover rear. It said where did the porch go. The recorder said Cobb, do you copy? And Daryl squeezed the bridge of his nose so hard his glasses clicked. Through the window in that room, we could see the porch light. It flickered in 3s again, then went steady, then flickered 3s once more. Headlights dragged along the street just beyond the lawn. We watched our cruiser pull up and idle, and then we watched ourselves step out like we were watching actors with our posture. Our doubles stood on the porch, shoulders almost touching. In the glass, they were farther apart than they were in the yard. The house was not replaying. It was inviting. It was looping our arrival back to the top like a good host refilling a glass. Daryl said no, not like fear, like a person declining a dance. He stepped backward and hit a wall that had not been behind him a second ago. He put his hand to it and found it warm like a body. We had our point of no return, and the house had been kind enough to mark it with brass on a table. I do not know what would have happened if we had run. I do know the hallway would have learned how long our legs were and matched us stride for stride. You can feel when a building is taking your measurements for a suit you did not order. I needed to say something brave, so I asked the air what 421 Ashfield really was. A voice answered, and it was my own speaking to myself in that flat way you hear when audio plays your reflection back. The address is a container. The voice said it like reading a line item. A place for events that do not suit the record. People arrive. Paper refuses. All the nights the city cannot afford to admit get put on a shelf that looks like a street, that looks like a house, that looks like a door. The twist is not that it is haunted. Haunted would make more sense. The twist is that it is administrative. It holds the things that happened without happening, and it makes sure they have witnesses that do not return arguments to the world where budgets live. The case files were full of calls that would be inconvenient or impossible to prove. A gas leak that only leaks when you write down. A fight that ends before the first punch is thrown and still leaves a broken tooth on the floor. Two officers who walk into a place to say it is okay and stay to keep it okay forever because the grid cannot afford to keep a light on here. The recorder on the table clicked off and let the house's hum own the room again. I tried the radio and got a single syllable from dispatch before the line swallowed itself. The syllable was my name. It sounded like someone choosing not to finish a prayer. Daryl put his hand on the back of the chair with his name on it and did not pull it out. He is not superstitious, but he is respectful. He looked at me and asked if we could cheat. Could we sit in the opposite chairs? Could we break the play's cards on purpose? I loved him for that in a way that all good partners earn. We took each other's seats. The immediate consequence was small and mean. The recorder clicked on again and spoke our names swapped, like a teacher doing attendance with a smirk. The delayed echo came from the window. The doubles on the porch hesitated half a second longer than we had. The porch light flickered in threes, and then a fourth quick blink like a hiccup. The house learned our trick and corrected it. That is what places like this do. They learn your workarounds and make them their favorite snacks. I told Daryl we would leave together on 3. I said it because the house liked threes, and I wanted to pretend I could use its rhythm the way you use a lullaby to slip past a child into the hallway. We stood, and the chairs moved an inch on their own, tucking in politely. We made for the door and found the frame had moved 2 inches to the right, which should not be possible, but floors and walls are just agreements between materials, so maybe it was easy for a building that does not need permits. We stepped into the hall, and the door closed behind us with a sound like a stamp. The hallway gave us one more room to earn our way out. It was a little office with a corkboard. On it were Polaroids that had not developed all the way, foggy images with clear centers, like the house could only afford focus for 1 inch at a time. People looked out at us with faces that might live on our street if you passed them twice in the grocery. Uniforms. Civilians. Old haircuts. A boy in a scout shirt with a badge sewn on wrong. In the center of each clear inch was a small brass plate nailed into the board with an address stamped in it. 421. 421. For 21. I looked for one with our faces and did not find it. I found 2 empty pins where something had been. The metallic taste in the air softened, then returned, stronger, as if the house had gone downstairs to answer the door and remembered we were still here. I do not mind telling you that my lungs chose small breaths. Daryl reached for the Polaroid of the boy, and the image tried to finish developing under his fingers, the mouth going from smear to shape, the eyes deciding their color. He let go and wiped his hand on his pant leg without meaning to. We moved quickly because somewhere outside our doubles had just knocked, and we did not want to meet ourselves doing the same job with the same questions. The front room did not stop us. The kitchen let us pass while holding its breath. The entryway offered us the door and also offered to keep it. We took the first offer. The porch air slapped us like weather returning from a cigarette break. The fog had shifted, but not enough to lift. The neighbors' windows were dark with the kind of dark that is deeper than a bulb can fix. Our cruiser waited where we had left it. The porch light flickered in threes behind us while we walked to the car. Daryl put his hand on the mailbox and told me to watch. He knocked. The box did not ring. He curled his fingers under the lip where a seam should be and found nothing because there was nothing to find. He looked at me with a face that wanted to be rude to the world for the way it did not keep its part of the deal. I told him we would file. I told him we would write the report anyway and let the system decide what it dares to keep. We got in the car and the radio played the one syllable again. My name cut off. I keyed up and said unit clear of 421, returning request supervisor. The CAD flashed error like a shy blush. The call did not exist. Our time did not exist. Our location was a polite null. The porch light flickered in threes again, then went still. If you have ever seen a trap, be kind at the last second to make sure you come back. You know the flavor of what that looked like. The immediate consequence of insisting on the source was a file on a table that knew my name. The delayed echo found me a week later when I was in the station break room. A new rookie I had not met yet said she drove down Ashfield 2 nights before and swore she saw a sagging house between two empty lots. And in the upstairs window, two uniforms were staring at her like their eyes had been printed on thin paper. She laughed and waited for someone to say the word haunted. No one did. The metallic taste climbed my throat like a memory trying to reach its old address. I tried to find Aldermarch on the old archive map that Maggie sent over from dispatch after she heard a rumor about her call. The street had been renamed twice. The reservoir had been capped and then capped again. The maintenance codes read like prayers written by engineers who wanted angels to respect their schedules. The drip rhythm we heard in the house matched a valve listed as retired. Retired is a nice word for do not look too close. I threw my pen across the desk and it bounced and rolled under the chair, and the sound it made sounded like a coin against a drain. At night, when the city gets brave with its quiet, I still taste pennies when I think about addresses. I still see the brass nameplates in that table light. I still watch the porch light flicker in threes behind my eyelids when I try to sleep. Daryl says we went in and we came out, and we owe it to ourselves to count that as a win. He is not wrong. He is also not corrected by the way the report we filed printed with the bottom third of the page missing, as if the printer knew where to stop. The system kept the top of the promise and left the rest to curl. We have not gone back. We have driven past. We have both seen grass where a porch should be, and we have both seen, when the fog sits low and still, the outline of a roof that knows our heights. Sometimes my phone warms in my pocket, and I think a photo is trying to exist where it refused to before. Sometimes I wake with my tongue tasting metal, and I think the house has found my breath again. If you have ever left a place that invented you while you were inside it, you know the way the air around your doorframe learns your name. This is the part where a story usually tells you what it means. I cannot. I can only tell you that addresses keep secrets like families do. They rename themselves. They double back. They refuse to open their mail. If you ever find yourself knocking on a door that your map denies, decide who you are before it opens. And if a porch light flickers in threes after you announce yourself, ask whether it is counting you in or counting you down. The promise of an address is only as good as the world that can afford to write it down. Now we move to the fourth for tonight, but only if you are up for it. Which detail in this one hooked onto your ribs? The seam-free mailbox, the reflections that lagged, or the table set for names that were not theirs yet? Tell me in the comments. Story 4. Midnight traffic stop at mile marker 13. The fog at mile marker 13 does not sit. It works. It folds and unfolds the highway like a tired sheet, and anything with red or blue light gets pulled into it as if color were gravity all its own. I left the bar of the light bar running at a low, steady pulse, a heartbeat for asphalt, and watched the glow bleed into the white. If you have ever stood where a road pretends to end, you know the smell I mean. Hot rubber that never burned, cold metal that never cooled, and an electrical taste like someone licked a 9-volt in the dark and liked it. My name is Raymond Locke. People call me Ray when they want me to relax. I am the person who taps a talisman against the steering wheel before a stop and tells himself it is just muscle memory. I have seen enough nights to know where the stories try to get in. My flaw is easy to list and hard to fix. I trust my gut too early and paperwork too late. It keeps me alive and keeps my supervisor frowning, and both of those facts were riding shotgun when I saw the sedan drift over the line twice just before the 13. Tonight, I had a ride-along. Rookie, fresh uniform, name tag that still squeaked when he breathed. Ethan, wide-awake eyes, the careful posture of someone who has been told a dozen times to keep their hands visible. I did not want him to see me spooked by fog. I did not want him to impress a superstition into his bones and carry it like a second badge. At the same time, I did not want to lie to him. There are miles of this county where the road is not entirely hours after midnight, and mile marker 13 has been one of them since before I started. I lit the stop. The sedan yielded like a habit that had no will of its own. It rolled to the shoulder, then the wheels kept rolling a hair after the car should have been still, the way a shopping cart does when it finds a slope your eyes cannot see. The brake lights glowed a dull ember, not bright, a faint red that made the fog drink and release shadows. Unknown before danger, 3 details that walked themselves into my notes. Seed 1, the license plate looked normal until my flashlight passed it, and for a breath it was blank plastic like a card never printed. Seed 2, the brake light stayed on after the engine noise died, which is not how a sedan behaves unless it learned a new trick. Seed 3, my radio threw out a single hiss that had the shape of my late partner's laugh tucked inside it. Ethan caught the movement of my eyes and asked if we were good. I told him we were fine and felt the lie sit heavy like a spare magazine. I called it in and used a tone that said routine traffic stop, forgettable, a wink to the console gods who like their forms neat. The dispatcher read me back my unit number in a rhythm I have loved since I fell in love with the job, and the fog pressed against my windows like it was eager to hear. I took a breath, checked my mirror, and stepped out into the buzzing midnight that always makes my skin remember childhood storms. The sedan's tailpipes ticked as they cooled. The brake lights kept their pulse, low and constant, patient as a lighthouse for a scene no map could sell. I told Ethan to stay by the rear quarter and watch my 6. He nodded, then squinted at the lights. He said the engine was off. He could hear it, but the lights were still bright. I said some cars do that, which is only sometimes true, and my voice fudged the truth so gently that I almost believed it. When I approached the driver window, it did not roll down. The glass showed me myself and the mist. Inside, a figure sat, head forward, hands at 10 and 2. I tried the simple things first. Tapped the window with the knuckles, polite. Flashed the light across the mirror, not aggressive. Introduced myself, name and reason for the stop, invitation to make this efficient. The driver lifted his head without lifting it. The shadow moved, but did not. And in that movement, I heard my late partner's voice come through the radio again. 2 syllables, my name, a joke we used to make about mile markers and omens. I ignored it because ghosts are bad at officer safety. The driver did not answer my questions. He spoke my badge number in a tone that sounded like someone practicing a new language under their breath. Ethan stepped closer and pointed to the license I'd asked for. The driver had held it up against the glass. It was the right size and stiffness, the hologram flashed. The name line was blank. The address line was blank. The photo was a gray square with the static of a dead channel. I asked Ethan to get a better angle, and he moved toward the passenger side. He said the brake lights just got brighter and then dimmed like someone breathed on them. His voice had a careful neutrality that rookies use to mask a jolt of surprise. I tried the door handle as a gesture. Locked. I asked the driver to unlock with the piece of the voice that carries authority like a baton. He turned his head toward me and did not reveal a face. There was a face there. There had to be. The glass was not that dark, and yet it was as if the fog had been printed onto his features. He spoke again, and this time there were 2 voices at once. One said I should not be here. The other said I was right on time. They harmonized in a way that made my teeth itch. The stakes moved. Before, this was about a drunk driver and a rookie's first stop. Now it was about my reputation in the car and my memory in the radio. If I backed away, Ethan would carry that back to the locker room. If I pushed too far, I would carry something worse home. You will think I should have taken the middle path. The highway does not always offer one. The fog closed around us in a soft ring, and when a pair of headlights crested the hill a mile back, they traveled toward us like a promise, and then winked out as if swallowed. I could feel Ethan's body get small behind me. He whispered that he saw our own patrol car reflected in the sedan's skin. That should have been obvious. Black paint reflects like a pool. He said something more that pinned my knees. He said the reflection showed our vehicle number exactly, down to the little scrape on the rear bumper from the shopping cart 3 weeks ago. He said the reflection had us in it, but the we inside was not moving like us. The we inside looked back, heads tilted as if waiting for us to catch up. Dread loops like to set little hooks. The driver spoke again, still in two voices that split like a road that never renamed itself. He warned me about accidents that had not happened yet. He described a semi failing a brake test 5 miles ahead, and he asked me to imagine braking in time. He told me a deer would step out just as my shift ended, and asked whether I would swerve or tap. He said the choices were both wrong because the road had been paved here with the same intentions for 30 years, and intentions have their own gravities. When he said my late partner's name, Ethan stiffened. I had not told him about Mark for a reason. You do not hand your rookies the bones in your closet and call it mentorship. The radio crackled again, and for a second, I heard Mark laugh like he used to whenever mile 13 showed up on a route plan. His laugh had a crunch to it that night. The sound of granular snow left in a cooler. Not blood, not pain. A bad recording of a good person in a bad spot. I called in a status check to dispatch out of habit. The line held my voice, then offered a long hiss and a pop like bubble wrap. Ethan said the brake lights just blinked 3 times in a rhythm that did not match my light bar. I counted without meaning to. 3, pause, 3. I hate how easy it is for patterns to start feeling like orders. The sedan's paint darkened until it was a mirror, and in it I saw my face, older than my memory, hairline a little higher, eyes still teaching the same old lessons. Behind me in the reflection, I saw the rookie that rode with me when Mark was alive, and I saw the spot on the shoulder where we had pulled a different sedan a decade ago. And I realized mile 13 was cooking all these moments in one pot. I made a call that tilted the rest of the night. I told Ethan to get the window hammer and stand at the passenger's side. Ready. I told him not to strike. I told him to keep listening to the radio, even if it told him things he wanted to believe. I positioned myself at the driver door, took a breath, and felt the talisman tap twice against the wheel in my head. He begged me to wait for backup. I told him backup was already here and had been for years. And I meant Mark, and I meant the part of me that had learned to make peace with never knowing which version of stop you are in until the papers print. The driver lowered the window a 1/4 inch, nothing more. Cold air rushed out, colder than the night, like a freezer exhaling. The scent of burning rubber came with it, but clean, like a classroom experiment with an eraser and a hot plate. He said a sentence that made me angry because of how much it remembered me. You swore you would not come back here. That is what I had said the year Mark died, into my own garden, into the sound of birds that refused to shut up. The driver lifted his hands, palms out, and on one palm I saw a scar I knew well. A line from the time a suspect's watch snagged me in a scuffle and left a neat reminder. The driver showed me my hand. Smugglers do not get that kind of detail, right? Projectionists do not. Technology can make a man's face look like fog and throw a voice in it too, but it does not remember the exact color of the nylon thread in a healed cut. My setup theory fell apart like wet cardboard. The sedan shivered under my palm as if it had a heart, and someone hit it with a stick. The brake lights glowed brighter, and the fog learned a deeper red. Ethan said he could see in the back seat now. He said he saw a uniform cap with a salt stain where a person always grabs it in summer. I stopped hearing him because the driver turned his head and leaned into the light. Inside the sedan, behind the wheel was me. Not a mirror trick, not a reflection bent wrong. Me a few years younger, face thinner, hair a little left of where my comb leaves it now, eyes on the job, and refusing to acknowledge the part where fear does arithmetic in the throat. I saw Mark in the passenger seat beside that version of me, one hand on his knee, one on the dash like he had always done with nervous drivers, that polite way of reminding the universe that legs exist. He looked at me with an expression that said everything all at once. Pride, pain, patience. The radio hissed and said my name in his voice, but weaker, as if his mouth was a room far away. If you have never learned that time sometimes throws a net over one part of the world and shakes it, I do not recommend it. Mile 13 is that net. The driver, who was me, did not look shocked to see me. He looked relieved, like when you spot your own taillights in the lot on a bad day. He spoke in two voices still, and now I heard them as past and present trying to share the same throat. He said the accident did not stop when the paperwork said it did. He said the road collected the moment of it and played it every night, and if no one stopped, the scene ran like a loop in a storefront, and if someone did stop, it invited you to walk into the glass. The ticking element slid into place, the way a coin slips into the one slot it was minted for. I checked the time. My shift had about 40 minutes left. The deer forecast he had given me would arrive about 5 minutes after if I took the loop home. The semi upstream had just failed its test, figuratively or literally, who knew? The brake lights on the sedan flickered 3 and 3 again, and the radio offered the smallest click of a mic, as if someone tried to talk and could not grow the word. Ethan begged me to wait, voice tight, but in control. He asked me to roll it back and call it in and live to argue about it in daylight. I did not. Point of no return is not always a cliff. Sometimes it is a shallow step that your foot finds while your brain thinks about something else. I wrapped my hand under the handle that my hand had held in a different winter, and I pulled, and this time it did not resist. The door opened on a hinge that did not squeal, and I leaned into an interior that smelled like ozone and old coffee, and a little like my own aftershave from 3 years ago. The me behind the wheel smiled, and it hurt like family. He said we made it longer than most. He said some people walked straight into the seat the first night, they worked the 13, and some last a decade, and the road takes what it can get. He said Mark was angry for a while, not at the dying, at the proof that paperwork is not enough to keep a place like this closed. I looked at Mark, and he looked better than the last time I saw him in the hospital, which is a kindness I am grateful for and a cruelty I am still paying off in dreams. The brake lights brightened. In the reflection of the glass, I saw our patrol car behind us, and then saw that the glass was not showing this patrol car. It was showing the one from that year. Same number, same scrape, same little cartoon sticker my kid put on the inside of the glove box, and I pretended to confiscate. The reflection did not show Ethan. It showed the rookie who had ridden with me that night. Eyes too brave, mouth try to learn a professional line that would not trip on tequila breath and tears. The layers arranged themselves and asked me to pick one, and I could not. You expect a crash to be loud in your memory. My memory of that night has always been a quiet drag. The tire catching a lip of guardrail that should have been a hair lower. The swerve that schools you with physics even if you got a D. Inside the sedan, the engine did not run, yet the dash hummed, and the speedometer needle hovered just above zero like a man on a ledge. The two voices that were my one voice said the same thing at the same time. You cannot fix it, but you can keep it from being only yours. If you want a grand statement from me about courage, you will not get it. I put my hand on the steering wheel, and it felt like my hand coming home to the shape it learned young. I placed my other hand on the seat where Mark sat, and felt warm cloth that did not come from flesh. In the red light, I could see the fog outside thicken and thin, a lung breathing for something older than me. I told Ethan to stay back. I told him to call in a code that would make someone look twice at the map. He said the radio was just static. He said the fog looked like water now. He said my name in a tone I have heard from rookies and fathers and no one else. The semi from up the road made its presence known by not arriving. The deer from the end of my shift did not step out. The loop had found a pause and placed us inside it. The two voices in the driver mouth finished their sentence. You can sit, Ray, and let it eat you slow, or you can reach for the key and count to 3 and be very precise about the way you choose being careful. The key sat in the ignition, thin black plastic, the kind I chewed when I quit smoking. It looked like a decision that had aged well and not at all. I did the small, brave thing I had. I reached for the key, and I did not turn it. I pulled it out. The car that had been, and the car that was made a sound that was not a sound. The brake lights did not go out. They glowed more faintly, as if honoring a rule I had forgotten. In the reflection, my older eyes met my younger, and I saw in both sets something that stung me. Relief that the rules still had teeth, and grief that the teeth were not always on my side. Mark put his palm over mine for a second, not pressure, presence. Then he looked forward again, toward the place where the road rejoined itself. The fog thinned with the nervousness of a crowd choosing to move. The headlights from behind that had vanished reappeared and passed us without slowing, which in any other story would offend me, and here felt like mercy. Ethan came around to the driver's side and asked if he could see. I told him no without thinking. He obeyed. I did not deserve that obedience, and I am grateful for it. The brake lights stepped back down to their ember level, and in the window, I saw my patrol car as it actually was again, with Ethan's silhouette where it belonged. We did not tow the sedan. We did not write a ticket. I stepped backward until my heels crossed gravel and then pavement, and then I nodded to the seat where Mark sat and to the face that is mine and not mine. The door swung itself shut with a little click like a well-trained pet. The radio in my chest pocket breathed, and this time Dispatch's voice got through. She was asking if my stop was complete because GPS had me off the grid in a way that made her want to mark it and move on. I said clear and heard my voice like someone else had tuned it. We drove away slow because leaving fast felt rude. Ethan asked me what he should write his notes. I told him to put down an equipment violation and a warning and the weather condition. He said, "What about the faces?" He said, "What about the license?" He said, "What about the brake lights that will not let me stop seeing them when I blink?" I told him to save those for a story he tells a person who will believe him. I said it half as a joke so I could blame Tone if he stared at me too long. Stakes have ladders. When I got home, my kid asked if I had been at the 13 because the cat refused to sit in my lap. In the shower, the steam smelled like rubber that never burned. I slept an hour and woke at the time I used to meet Mark for breakfast after a rough one, even on days when I had not talked to him aloud. I went back to the shoulder at noon on my day off and found nothing but 2 sets of skid marks that did not look fresh and did. A highway crew put down new paint that week and covered them beautifully. By the next midnight, they were back like freckles. If you stop there on a foggy night and do nothing, the brake lights will glow a faint red through the mist. If you stop there and ask the wrong questions, they will glow brighter, and you might hear someone you miss tell you a next line to a joke you forgot. If you stop there and open the door that is yours and not yours, be aware that you're making a trade with a road that keeps good books. I met a driver at a gas station last month who said mile 13 costs him an extra 10 minutes every trip. He leaves an apple by the shoulder and says the fog thins and thanks. I do not advise rituals. I understand them. I am not here to solve a haunting. I do not even think haunting is the correct word. I think some places keep ledgers of moments that do not balance, and they ask for witnesses and offer bright red receipts. I also think a rookie needs to learn that not every loop is a trap if you name it early and walk backward with a hand on the rail. If you have ever driven off a night like this into the ordinary hum of streetlights and wondered whether you carried anything home, you did. It is in the small ways your fingers find keys. This is the part where I invite the listener to tell me what they would have done. I'm not asking to argue. I am asking because the brake lights at mile 13 like company, and I want them to like yours less than mine. If you find yourself there with the fog working and the radio playing a voice that learned your laugh, keep your hands where you can see them. Keep your eyes soft so the red cannot slice them. Count to 3, then 3 again. Say the names you owe something to. Then leave without signaling, because nothing out there is watching your blinker. Now we move to the 5th story if you are still with me in the fog. Drop a quick comment if the brake lights got under your skin, or if the 2 voices felt familiar. Story 5, Evidence Locker 21B. They say metal can remember. Not like a diary, more like a mouth that keeps shut until the room is quiet. I did not believe that until the night I put my ear to Locker 21B and heard it hum with a breath that did not belong to electricity. If you have ever worked in a basement where the air tastes like old pennies and ozone and damp cardboard, you know the way a building's quiet can learn words. The concrete sweats. Fluorescents buzz like they're chewing tin foil. Keys talk to each other when no one is looking. It felt normal until the locker said my name without using a voice. I am Detective Laura Vance, and on paper, I am good at what this city asks of me. I love order the way some people love coffee. I write lists for my lists, and my idea of relief is a row of boxes with labels that match. They put me on the evidence audit because I do not blink at tedium, and because a scandal 3 precincts overmade the brass want to see our inventory sing in tune. I told myself I would treat the audit like Sunday laundry. Sort, fold, return each thing where it belongs. Simple math if you ignore the ghosts. The basement door sticks on humid nights. I learned to lift while I push, a small courtesy this building appreciates. The corridor to the locker room was cold enough to make my breath guess at winter, even though it was June above ground. On the wall, someone had written a cartoon face in Sharpie with XS for eyes and the caption, "Do not feed 21B." I smiled because cops are children when you take their sunlight away. Then I used my key, spun the handle, and felt the metal handle vibrate like a cat warning a stranger not to touch. Unknown before danger always shows up early if you pay attention. 3 details introduced themselves as I opened the door. First, the air smelled faintly like lightning right before it happens, that glassy ozone that makes your tongue remember batteries. Second, the concrete under the shells had a faint ring on it, like a water line, as if the room had once filled up to your knees with some invisible flood. Third, the digital clock above the door that tracks after hours entries blinked 3:11 and held there, even though the time on my phone said 8:46. I told myself the clock needed a reset. The hum from 21B told me to stop lying. Evidence lockers are arranged like the old library stacks, long alleys of steel doors that eat light. Ours are lettered by row and numbered down the aisle. 21B squats at the end of the second corridor, right where you would put a thing you do not want to think about while you count. I swiped my badge, and the panel gave me green without the polite delay you usually get in old rooms. The door clicked like it had been waiting. Inside, all the things that refused to belong somewhere else had gathered to practice their patience. I started with the manifest because paper is what I trust. It said 21B contained 4 boxes from a burglary, 2 items from a closed homicide, a wallet from a missing person, and a bag of unclaimed personal effects from a fire. I lifted the first box, and the weight did not match the label. We all know that particular small dread. It says a hand has already been here, and this hand did not leave a note. I cut the evidence tape with a hiss that makes my shoulders relax. Inside sat a men's wristwatch with a cracked crystal, hands frozen at 3:11. The chain was warm like a pocket. My brother vanished when I was 19. He was 21 and tireless, and helped me move into a dorm where everything smelled like paint and detergent. He told me to lock my balcony door, even though it was 7 floors up. He walked to the store for a second roll of packing tape and did not come back. When you live with a hollow like that long enough, your mind learns to walk around it. Seeing the frozen watch made my ankle twist on a thought I had not allowed in years. My brother left at 3:11, which is a time you remember because the last text you sent reads like a dare to fate. I wrote the watch on my list with a clean block letter, even though my hand wanted to add lines. The second thing in the box was a cassette tape, clear plastic with the old black reels, a label and block caps that read play last. We still keep a tape deck in the property room because sometimes trials ask you to resurrect ghosts with magnetic tape. I set on the table with a careful tenderness that made me angry. The third item underneath was a stack of mugshot prints with faces blurred into smooth ovals like someone had painted over the features with milk. I felt ridiculous for shivering. Photographs fade. That is not a haunting. My stomach did not care for the distinction. I closed the box and slid it onto my audit card. The card is older than me and squeaks like someone telling a joke on a bad day. I reached into 21B for the next labeled carton and dragged out a vinyl evidence bag with a badge inside. My badge number. The metal was dented and flecked with something brown that looked like old coffee and also did not, and I stood very still while the part of my brain that handles panic counted backward to 10 like a friend. The manifest did not list a badge. The log did not show a custody entry for 2 years. I lifted the plastic. The bag felt heavier than it should, like it knew my hand too well. You can make yourself busy when reality refuses to perform. I moved to the computer terminal and pulled the camera feed just to look at something that agreed to be real. The security video showed me walking in 5 minutes ago, ordinary as rain. It also showed me walking in at 3:11 a.m. wearing a different jacket and carrying the cart with the squeaky wheel, moving as if I knew the path with my eyes closed. I clicked back through days and found at least 3 nights where I visited the locker while I was at home drinking tea and reading my brother's old graduation program to keep the quiet from learning my name. I told myself a story that felt smart. Someone was planting items. Someone with access to logs and a grudge and a fondness for stagecraft. Maybe a cop we pushed too hard after a bad shoot. Maybe a clerk who resented our hours and our jokes too much. It fit like a jacket you want to wear because it has pockets and does not show stains. I decided I would look for seams. Planted evidence, leaves, fingerprints on the script. It smells like sweat and shortcuts. It does not hum with a frequency that makes your teeth ache. When I turned back to the cart, the box with the watch and the cassette and the blurred faces had returned to the shelf inside 21B without rolling or squeaking. The evidence tape was whole again. The list I had made still had the check marks, but my handwriting looked 1 degree off, like someone imitated my block letters after watching me twice. I laughed because sometimes panic wears a silly hat. Then I opened the box again because sometimes measurement is the only God that listens. The watch still read 3:11. The cassette still read play last. The mugshots had shuffled themselves and placed a new one on top. The face beneath the blur had my jawline. I brought the cassette to the tape deck like a person walking a tame animal they do not trust near preschool. The deck accepted the cassette with a soft mechanical sigh that I recognized from a childhood that smelled like plastic Christmas trees. I did not press play. I wrote a note to myself instead. Do not touch until audit complete. Then I tucked the note under the deck so I could find it when my nerves ran away and pretended not to see where they went. Rising tension in our line of work is less about gunshots and more about repetition. When a wrong thing happens twice, you inventory your anchors. I checked the ceiling lights. I checked the fuse box. I checked the far door. The clock above the door still read 3:11, as if the building had chosen a hill to die on. The hum from 21B modulated like a choir learning a second part. The ring on the concrete darkened, as if something had remembered to rise. I logged a formal anomaly report and walked it upstairs to the captain, because paper is in or you can row with even on a ridiculous sea. He read it and asked if I was getting enough sleep. He asked if the break room coffee had turned. He asked if I needed a day or two, the kind of kindness that makes you feel like a child in a hard hat. I told him I would finish the audit. He told me to stop chasing ghosts. He said like a joke to be kind, and was not. When I returned to the basement, the tape deck had turned itself, so the reels faced me like eyes. Beat 1. I moved items from 21B to 21A to isolate the problem. The things from 21B returned themselves while my head was turned. The things from 21A did not move unless I pushed. I used a marker to draw a line on the shelf and wrote the date beside it. When I came back from the bathroom, the line had been copied again 3 inches farther back, neat as a surveyor. The watch on the table ticked once and stopped at 3:11 again, as if practicing. Beat 2. I pulled the security feed for the next hour and sat with the dull comfort of bad angles. The video showed me entering 21B and staying inside longer than is reasonable to catalog, head inclined like I was listening at a door. It showed me carry a box out, and then it showed me carry that same box back in, and in the middle it showed nothing because the timestamp froze at 3:11 and my body blurred like motion hidden behind glass. When the feed restarted, the box was on the shelf, and my notebook had a line that I did not write. It said, "Do not open the next box." Beat 3. 21B stopped pretending to be a container and started acting like a host. New items appeared on the lower shelf with the bored patience of cats. A small cardboard box with a drab label from a long, closed discount store. Inside was a toy wind-up bird the color of nickel. Its key was stuck and its beak had a chip. I knew this bird because I had locked it in my childhood closet after it chirped all night. My mother had thrown it away. I had watched the trash truck lift and crush. Seeing it here did that thing to my skin where your body tries to step out of itself. The isolation set in right then. IT checked the logs and told me everything was normal. They showed me code that said the locker had received and released items in accordance with policy, as if policy wrote itself when you were not looking. A detective laughed it off and told me to get out in the sun. The captain sent a group email congratulating me on working so hard no one else had to. I found myself lying about where I was going when I walked downstairs, which is the behavior of people who need help and have decided to volunteer for the long way instead. Choice pressure looks like 3 doors that all lead to basements. I could ignore the cassette and hope the hum grew bored. I could press play and risk making the voice in there real. I could ask someone I trust to stand on my shoulder while I did it, which would mean turning my private problem into team one. The ticking element sat above the door like a sly god with 2 numbers. The digital face still read 311. My phone clicked from 940 to 941 while I did nothing with purpose. I chose to be unwise alone. I pressed play. The tape hissed the way old tapes do, like leaves against a screen door. A woman's voice filled the room. It was mine, recorded on a day I have not lived yet. She sounded tired, like someone who had talked too long to someone who did not answer. She said, "Laura, do not open the next box." She said, "When you do, it is going to be too late to put it all back." She said, "The watch is not a clue. It is a lid." She said, "If you love him, stay ignorant in this one very narrow way." She said, "The locker only takes what you will not release." I pressed stop, and the deck kept spinning anyway for 3 seconds, as if the tape did not care about my thumb. I stood very still and had the kind of thought that sounds brave in a movie and petty in a life. I thought, I'm tired of being told where not to look. Then I put the cassette back in its case, closed the deck, and reached for the smallest next box, because sometimes defiance needs to creep or you lose your nerve. The box was labeled Vance, which is exactly the kind of melodrama that should have made me laugh. I did not laugh. Inside was a file that should not exist. The manila felt brand new under my thumb and smelled like the inside of a paper mill. The tab read L, Vance, Detective, with my personnel number and a space where a middle initial should be. The first page was a missing person report for a 21-year-old male with my last name. It listed the time last seen as 311. It listed last known address as a dorm I can walk through in my head. The officer's signature line had been typed over twice. The date filed read 11 years ago, and also tonight. When I turned the page, I felt the locker lean closer, which is not a sentence I thought I would ever write. The second page was a memo from records. It said no individual of that name exists in any city database. It used the measured language that bureaucracies use when they flush a person down a pipe. Further pages repeated that pattern in different formats. Student records, DMV, library cards, a parking ticket that had the right plate and the wrong driver, each stamped with a small rubber stamp I did not recognize. The stamp read resolved, and the ink was colorless like water. The mugshots from the earlier box lay on the table like children sent to the principal. The blur had reseated on 2 of them. One was my brother's face, drawn by memory and error, closed but off, the way a relative paints at night. The other was mine, with a softness around the eyes I know from mirrors. The name below, both ovals read Vance L. The ears of paper tricked and twitched like they heard their own names. I want to put the photo's face down the way people do when a picture of the dead returns on a day you did not expect it. I left them up because shame is a trap and the locker likes traps. The red herring I had nourished died without drama. No corrupt officer, no clever prank, no grudges with keys. 21B was not a locker. It was a room that pretended to be a box. A container where unresolved outcomes were stored until someone had the nerve or the foolishness to open them. It took what did not reconcile and taught it to hum until a person like me made order from it. It did not want me to solve anything. It wanted me to become the way it solved. The hum under my hand climbed a half step, like a musician pleased with their note. Point of no return wore a small gesture. I took the watch with the cracked crystal and set on my wrist. It was too big and slid to the bone where a clock should not live. The second hand tried once to move and then stopped at 311 because that is what it does. The tape on the deck spun without tape. The digital clock above the door began to count backward. The hum from 21B warmed to a tone you hear in hospital machines that forget their original purpose. I opened the box within the box because the voice on the tape had asked me not to, and I am the kind of person who has to knock on a door twice. The last box was small and stupid, like a gift from a cousin who did not know your size. Inside was a badge. The metal was clean and the number was mine. Under it lay a typed note I recognized as mine from the way I aligned the dashes and the way I refused to use them. The note read inventory complete. The words looked like victory and tasted like failure. Under the note was a photograph of the evidence room door with a paper sign taped to it that said 21B temporarily closed. We have never closed a locker except for fumigation. The twist was not knives or blood or ghouls. The twist was paperwork. The locker feeds by rewriting people into evidence when the story refuses to finish. It rounded my brother down to a line item labeled resolved. It had begun to file me under the same shape. I could feel the logic crawl up my wrist into my elbow and ask to live in my shoulder. If no conclusion exists, make a box. If no body exists, make a file. If a detective will not stop asking, make the detective the answer. The hum was not hunger. It was digestion. I tried to put items back in random places like an idiot sabotaging a meticulous banquet. The boxes returned to 21B when I blinked. I tried to log the watch under the burglary case that it did not belong to. The computer typed in correct numbers that my fingers did not intend to press. I tried to take the cassette and throw it into the lost and found to make it someone else's problem. The tape deck held it like a mouth and played my voice counting to 3 in a tone that told me I'd already done this wrong somewhere I could no longer see. I made one choice I am still half proud of and half ashamed of. I put my brother's file under my jacket and walked straight out to the parking lot without telling the captain or the camera or the idea of consequence. The air above ground felt thin and friendly and false. I sat in my car with the dome light on like a person who just learned their child can read and is pretending to look impressed. The file inside my jacket was warm as if paper could blush. I opened it under the dome, and the pages inside were blank as napkins. The hum followed me up the stairwell and into the car and settled under the hood like a small animal who plans to live there. In the morning, a detective from day shift went down to the basement and found the door to evidence jammed. He lifted while he pushed and admired himself for knowing the trick. He says he heard a faint sound under the light buzz, like something making notes with a dull pencil. He saw a new box on the middle shelf of 21B with a label printed on a nice machine in the admin office. The label read Detective Vance. Under it in smaller type it read open only when the case returns. He swears the box rustled, which is not a thing cardboard does. The captain called me into his office at noon and asked why I had removed property without a form. I showed him my hands. He asked why the camera showed me in the basement at 3:11 two nights in a row. I showed him my phone's battery report and the way it spikes at the same minute like a tiny heart attack. He told me to go home. I told him I would finish the audit. He printed a temporary sign and asked me to tape it to the basement door where the cameras can see. It read 21B temporarily closed. I pressed the tape flat and felt the door vibrate under my palm like a throat swallowing. I would like a clean ending. I would like to tell you I solved something and the locker accepted the closure and let my brother walk back into a room that remembers him. What I have is smaller and meaner and truer. I left the cassette in the deck. I set the watch on the shelf and did not put it on again. I wrote the truth in the audit with the same neat hand I use for birthdays. Locker contains items from cases that are not cases. Locker returns items when moved. Locker hums. Locker remembers names that do not exist. I signed it and initialed it and logged my initials as evidence because the system insisted. When you listen late at night, the room answers questions you did not ask aloud. I asked what happens if I stop coming. The hum rose and lowered like breath. I asked what happens if I bring someone else. The lights flickered once in 3 beats, like a child clapping. I asked if my brother was here in some way that would hurt me to know. The watch ticked 1 second past 3:11 and fell back. I asked if the locker could be emptied. The tape deck clicked, and my voice said no in a way that sounded like a person learning to be kind to herself. If you ever find yourself loving order the way I do, be careful which rooms you choose to organize. Some places do not want to be conquered. They want to recruit. If you hear a hum behind steel and you taste coins in the air, ask yourself whether the thing needs a detective or a witness. If a box asks you to play it last or not at all. And if a clock stalls at 3:11 in a room that does not know what day it is, do not fall in love with the idea that time owes you a refund. I'm still here. I go downstairs more than I should. I pretend to count when I'm really listening. Sometimes I touch the door, and sometimes the door touches back. The new sign looks official and tired already. The blurred faces in the mugshots practice becoming clear. When I sleep, I dream that paper folds itself into birds and flies out of a locker, and then returns because nests matter even to pages. When I wake, I go to work because the audit is not finished, and because finishing is the game I play to stay a person with a badge. If you are still with me, tell me what you think the locker takes. Evidence, names, or the parts of us that refuse to let an ending be an ending. Tell me if you have ever heard a room learn your name and hum it back when you turn away. Now we move to the sixth story, if your lights are still on and your watch is not stuck at 3:11. Story 6. The Laughing Siren, you learn the night by its sounds. Trucks breathe like animals. Sodium lights buzz like hornets that forgot how to sting. When my siren came alive on its own at 3 a.m. in an empty industrial park, it did not wail. It laughed. Not a recording, not a prank. A tight little cackle that rose into a wheeze and back again. If you have ever heard machinery imitate a human and almost get it right, you know the itch it leaves at the base of your skull. I turned the switch to off. The light bar died. The laughter kept going as if the car wanted to enjoy the joke a little longer. Whose joke, though? My name is Marcus Bell. I'm not the type to see patterns in spilled salt. My partner jokes that I would rather trust a dead battery than a hunch. That is mostly true. It keeps the reports clean. It keeps the mind cleaner. My stakes are ordinary and heavy. Be a good cop on nights when the city tests your nerves. Prove to my partner that I can be the yes you need when things tilt. Get home before dawn without waking my daughter, who once told me sirens sound like monsters laughing. I argued then. I wish I had listened harder. Unknown before danger. That first night, the dash cam's little red light blinked as the car chuckled. I pulled the SD card and played it on the mobile screen. The waveform danced in a way sirens never do, round and human, a rhythm that remembered breath. Under the chuckle was a faint second track, quiet as a finger tapped on glass. My own laugh lives near my throat when I force it. The recording made me taste pennies. Dispatch came on the air and asked which unit was running hot by Warehouse Row, because they could hear a siren with no calls on the board. I told them I was code 4. I did not say my car was telling jokes. I parked under a camera and wrote the incident like a mechanic would. Electrical surge. Faulty relay. Possible short in the horn pack. I did not use the word laugh. The word would make someone else choose a face for me. On the brick beside my window, graffitied in chalky white, someone had written the sentence, "The siren knows when you smile." I took a photo for the report and told myself punks get bored after midnight. Then I did the thing that invites the dark to try again. I chuckled at my own caution. The siren answered with a breathy giggle that rose and fell like a tiny wave. It heard me. Next night, I pulled over a beat-up coupe with a loose muffler. Routine stop. Hands at 10 and 2. My voice working the comm, I learned from a training officer who always sounded like he had time. The moment my flashlight found the driver's eyes, the siren hiccuped into an uninvited whoop and slipped into a laugh, a bright, ugly sound like a party favor or a kid imitating a villain. The driver flinched and reached for the glove box. My hand went to my weapon and my other hand went up to calm him. I cut the siren. The laughter kept going for 3 full breaths, like a recording finishing itself. I reviewed the dash cam video in the lot before I cleared. The switch on the panel was off. The audio track insisted the siren played with gusto. We get pranks sometimes. People hide speakers, loop weird sounds, try to bait you into the wrong mood. I checked the grill, the wells under the seats, the trunk. Nothing. My partner, Nadia, arrived and heard the end of the chuckle. She lifted both eyebrows in a way that says, "I will let you pick the story." I told her power bleed from the light bar. She looked at the chalked wall and said that graffiti is new. I had not told her about the line. It now read, "The siren knows when you smile first." Dread loops like to practice in 3s. The following shift, 2 different officers called dispatch to report my unit running code 2 in places I had not been. One near the old cannery, the other by the stadium lot. I was on the bypass with Nadia at the time. Windows cracked to smell if rain was real. Over the radio came a little snort of laughter on our channel. Then my call sign. Then silence. Nadia glanced at me like a trainer giving a dog a treat and waiting to see if the trick sticks. I keyed up. My voice carried clean. The snort repeated a half second later in my exact tone, only someone cut it shorter. The mimic had learned my exhale. We went to the garage. The techs were happy to measure and replace. They swapped the siren amp. They checked the harness. They opened the panel and sighed like doctors with an easy case. While we waited, I wandered outside to the fence with the graffiti. Someone had carefully erased the word first. The sentence now read, "The siren knows when you smile back." I made a list in my head because lists keep the fear honest. Seed 1. The dash cam records the laugh even with the switch off. Seed 2. Dispatch hears sirens where no units are. Seed 3. The wall keeps rewriting warnings about smiles. The payoff had not arrived. It would. If I told you I did not smile for 3 days, you would not believe me. We smile when we mean to be smaller for strangers. We smile to finish a sentence kindly. We smile to prove we are unbothered when we are. The siren understood this better than I did. During a welfare check at a storage unit, I told the tenant we would call a medic if he wanted. He cracked a joke about batteries and nights. I gave him a courtesy grin. My light bar was dead. My siren switch was off. The cruiser made a tiny, private sound. If laughter can purr, it did. The tenant stiffened and asked if I brought someone else. I did not answer the question he meant. The isolate started quietly, which is how a smart thing hurts you. Nadia asked for reassignment because she could not stand the idea of my car laughing behind her when a scene turned. She did not say afraid. She simply stopped standing near me when we lined up for briefings. Dispatch routed me fewer calls. When I keyed up, I sometimes heard my own quick breath play first on a 1-second delay, the way a radio does when two speakers are stepping on each other. The motor pool took my cruiser for a week. They gave me a loaner. The first night the loaner sat in my driveway. At 3 a.m., a chuckle rose in the air like a bird and faded, and the chalk line on my street curb said a new thing. The siren knows where you live. I did the responsible version of panic. I put in a request for a full electrical teardown. They stripped my unit like a salvage car. They replaced harnesses. They even swapped the head unit to a different brand the department hates because the menu is weird. The laughter followed anyway, not as a sound in the wires, but as a thing that tasted like metal in the mouth before it broke into something you hear. I told myself a hacker was writing the PA through the radio net. IT ran their scans. Clean. My supervisor said sometimes a city gets into a season of coincidence. I said yes, because arguing with seasons makes you sound like a person who counts crows on purpose. At home, my daughter likes cartoons where animals pretend to be people. The night the laugh joined hers, it changed the math. She was on the rug, legs tucked, watching a show that uses tuba notes for joy. She giggled at a penguin falling on a banana peel. Outside, from the curb or the air or the idea of a curb, a higher version of her giggle repeated and elongated into a siren's cadence, the kind ambulance drivers use to slice intersections. It warped at the end into what I can only call delighted. My daughter frowned at the window and said, "Daddy, the monster heard me." I told her monsters are pretend. I do not think I convinced either of us. I decided to confront it directly because cowards live longer but sleep worse. Midnight, Industrial Park, the same spot where the first laugh began. I parked in the glow of a dead office window. The air smelled like oil and rust and the sweet skunk of antifreeze. I set my phone to record. I set the dash cam to log audio only. I turned every siren control off and pulled the fuse for good measure. Then I forced myself to smile like I do for a neighbor who waves too long. Nothing for 3 seconds. Then a small chuff the exact size of the breath before a laugh lives. I waited. The chuff returned, then multiplied, then layered with a copy at a higher pitch. It sounded like me learning to laugh in a room with mirrors. I asked the empty car the kind of question that invites regret. "What are you?" The radio made a scratchy clearing of a throat. A voice laughed softly. "Mine." It sat where the welcome lives in my tone at the end of a call when the danger is over and a bit of gratitude leaks out. That laugh repeated twice, then again with a tiny cough that I do when my allergies fluff up. I did not remember those details until the siren arranged them. It had recorded every chuckle, snort, sigh of relief, and little nonsense exhale and stitched them together into an impression that felt like someone wearing my jaw as a glove. A call came in while I sat there, a disturbance near the riverfront. I answered with a simple copy. Over the air, my voice responded that I was already on scene. It laughed after it said it. The channel kept repeating my call sign and laughing, like a child on a cheap walkie playing with a button. I drove to the riverfront anyway, because defiance keeps a person feeling like a person. 3 other units showed up and gave me looks like I had brought a barking dog to a cinema. I wanted to tell them, you do not earn a haunt. It finds a spot you cannot cover and learns to press. Graffiti changes when you try to understand it. 2 nights later, the wall said the siren knows when you smile into it. The last 2 words were underlined in a crude heart. I knocked on the door by that wall and asked the night guard if he had seen anyone tag it. He said the camera shows nobody. The chalk appears between frames. He laughed because that is what humans do when the choices are laugh or exhibit sadness to a stranger in a uniform. My car made a tiny answering sound below hearing, the kind you feel in your teeth while your ears pretend nothing is happening. I stopped smiling. I held my face like a polite oath. The world does not encourage that. People try to draw courtesy grins from me like blood. A clerk made a joke. A kid on a bike did a little trick. A woman at a crosswalk looked nervous, and I wanted to soften the moment and did not. I went home that way, and my daughter asked why my mouth was a straight line. I told her I was saving my smiles for her. She attempted a brave grin, and it did not land because she already understands more about keeping monsters out than I want her to. Outside, something chuckled once distant, annoyed. Choice pressure arrived in the form of a night I could not duck. Nadia called to say a multiple vehicle pileup needed traffic control near the stadium. She had been covering nights without me, but this one was wide. I told her I would come. She said she would put me at the far end where fewer ears could meet my noise. I parked 2 blocks out and set flares. The siren in my car asked if it could help and laughed at its own joke, voice stacked with all my exhausted relief sound from 100 ends of shifts. The radio echoed the laugh on a delay, so it would meet itself and make a braid of me. Climax does not have the decency to announce itself. I sat behind the wheel and watched tow trucks do their ballet. I glanced at the dash cam. The tiny red, I blinked steady. In the housing glass, I saw a reflection of a person in my seat with a grin that did not belong to the face. My mouth was neutral. The reflection's was not. The siren bloomed from nothing into a 2-tone yodel and then flattened into wild laughter. A perfect loop like a reel of my happiest exhale cut and laced end to end. I stayed still. The reflection tilted its head and laughed harder, both hands on the wheel in my exact resting grip. I spoke my name aloud because sometimes saying it ties you to yourself. The laughter softened to a gentle pressure, like a hand on the shoulder from someone who loves you enough to be annoying. Then the siren played the laugh I'd give my daughter when she shows me a comic panel and watches my eyes for pride. It followed with the tiny laugh I had after my first solo shift years ago when I sat in the lot and let the silence do what it did. It layered both with the sound I make when a driver gets a warning instead of a ticket and says thank you in a tone that makes you feel like people are possible. The car was telling me it knew me better than I did. I reached for the mic to call it in. The radio spoke first in my voice and said, "All units, I am clear. Laughing, show me return to station." It added a breathy laugh I did not recognize as mine until it finished. The dashcam light sped up like a heart monitor in a sprint. The reflection smiled wider, and the glass held that smile a fraction of a second after I looked away, as if the grin enjoyed living there. I pulled the key and the engine died. The siren did not. It laughed until it wheezed and then started again, calm as a file download. I made the only choice that felt like mine. I sat with it. I let the loop play until I could hear where the seams were, the small clicks where one laugh ends and another begins. I counted them. 3 laughs from the same winter. 2 relieved huffs from summer nights. 1 little cough that followed the allergy wheeze. I whispered into my cupped hands like a kid telling a secret into a jar. I said, keep those. Leave the ones I need. The reflection nodded, which scared me more than anything because it meant the mimic understood bargain. It did not stop. It did fold a layer away, so the night quieted enough for sirens that were not mine to go on being sirens. Fallout is a quiet animal. In the morning, an officer from days found my cruiser idling by the lot. Lights off, dash cam blinking, siren off, and a soft, breathy laugh living in the speaker like someone asleep. No sign of me inside, he wrote, meaning the car was empty. I was home, sitting on the floor, watching my daughter draw a penguin who does not slip on banana peels anymore. Outside, somewhere at curb height, something chuckled once with a tone that said it was satisfied for now. The dash cam from that night plays back with a flaw. Every third blink of the indicator, a smile flashes in the glass without a face attached. It is a good smile. It does not belong to anybody. If you ever hear a siren turn into laughter, do not give it your best moments on purpose. Save your small grins for people who deserve them. If graffiti tells you that the siren knows when you smile, understand that walls are sometimes wiser than your pride. And if you find a laugh of yours living in a speaker, count where it begins and ends. You may not beat it. You might teach it what a boundary is. I say might because I'm still learning which smiles are mine. Now we move to the seventh story if your nerves can take one more night. Which detail got under your skin this time? The wall that rewrote its warning, the dash cam grin, or the thought that every little relieved laugh you make might be collected by something patient? Tell me in the comments. Story 7. K9, Echo won't heal. Echo started refusing me under a sky that sounded like ice breaking. Frost crisped the grass behind the warehouses, and my breath felt heavy, like I had borrowed lungs from an old diver. He planted his feet in the field, hackles rising, and barked at a patch of darkness where there was only damp air and the smell of wet earth and rust. He would not heal. He cut a half circle and shoved me with his shoulder the way a dog moves a calf from a ditch. I put my hand on his collar to correct him, and he growled from a place that did not care about corrections at all. My name is Daniel Mercer, K9 handler 4 years running, and Echo is the one thing that still listens to me when paperwork does not. I have told people it is a partnership, and that is true on even days. On odd ones, I trust him more than I trust people, which is a flaw you can hold by the sharp end or the handle. After my divorce, the house learned my footsteps and forgot the rest, so I learned Echo's instead. He sleeps light, he hates oranges, he loves the smell of cheap coffee, and until that night, he came when I said heal without thinking about it twice. We were working the river corridor, where alleys grow weeds like opinions. Echo stopped at the mouth of a narrow cut between two shuttered shops and leaned hard into me. He would not let me step forward. I had never felt a dog make itself into a door until then. The night had that empty theater silence where you hear fabric move. I said his name twice. He stared at the alley the way a person stares at a closet they know by heart. My radio mic hissed at the exact volume of his growl, like a station tuning itself to a dog's throat. Unknown before danger shows as quiet riddles. Echo snarled at my reflection in a dark window, and I saw, very clearly, a man in uniform standing at my shoulder who was not me. Echo came back from behind a dumpster with an evidence tag, clenched gentle as teeth, paper dry and crisp, no case number, no initials, just a blank hole where handwriting should live. When I keyed up to tell dispatch we were code 4, the mic breathed like a person about to speak and then swallowed whatever sentence it considered. I kept my voice level because panic sounds unprofessional on air. In the evidence garage, the corner camera always catches spiders and men who think no one is watching. Echo charged the far bay where impounded bikes gather like a metal herd. He bit the empty air 3 times and yanked me sideways so hard I had to plant a heel. Teeth snapped on nothing, then on something, then on nothing again. Later, when I pulled the CCTV, the shadow in that corner looked like a person who had decided to be less than a person in practice at it. Echo barked as if the shadow had breath. The monitor took that breath and dimmed the image like it preferred anything that could fog glass. The clock in my head began keeping a second time. Our shift was set to end at 0600. The city had a planned power cut at 0300 to test a substation by the water plant. I wrote those numbers on my palm with a Sharpie because I like to see ticking things when they tick. Echo paced and panted and gave me the sound that means he has a job and I'm late to it. When his pant matched the radio hiss, I had the urge to turn the radio off and let the dog do the talking. I did not, because that is the kind of sentence that gets you removed from a page. The call that took us inside the old cold storage building came in at 2318. Trespass, possible copper theft, building no longer powered, door on the south side, hanging open like a tired lip. Echo pulled like a tide. We moved through dust with the smell of mothballs and something sweet that should not have been there. At the top of the first stairwell, Echo vanished. The lead went slack in my hand like a cut rope. He did not make the collar ring jingle. He did not make the sound his nails make when he chooses speed over silence. He was gone the way lights go in a storm, clean and rude. When he came back, he did not come from the direction he left. He stood at the bottom of the stairwell and stared up at me. The mic on my vest hissed, then clicked once, a tiny throat clear, and dispatch patched through a call from 3 blocks over that would not be logged for another 7 minutes. Echo knew the stairwell like the dispatch board does, only ahead. He looked at me, then at the dark gap under the door that led to the basement and smelled like glue. When I took a step, he body-checked me again, stubborn and apologetic in the same motion. Protocol said clear the building with a second officer. My supervisor, Delaney, said this specifically on Tuesdays because Tuesday is when the rookies remember nothing. I told Delaney I had Echo and we were in. He told me to wait. I told him to read me later. Echo led me instead of me leading him, and that choice felt like a coin flipped and caught wrong. Immediate consequence, mild, a chewing out from a person who meant it. Delayed Echo, sharp, a note in my file that would haunt the hallway where promotions happen. I kept my hand on Echo's harness, and we moved through 2 rooms that felt like they had learned to be empty on purpose. By 0013 we were outside again, and Echo took me where he wanted, not a heel in him. The old records annex behind the station has a chain link fence with a lock every kid in town can pick. Echo nosed the gap at the bottom I did not know existed and slid through with the patience of a snake. I followed with more scraping than grace. The annex door was padlocked, and someone polite had hung a sign that said condemned in letters that looked embarrassed. Echo's teeth found a lock guard and worried it until the chain learned it was tired. The door opened with a thick sigh. The air inside smelled like dust and damn paper and the breath of a room that had kept a secret too long. The first cage rattled a rhythm I did not recognize. The second held a stack of metal file baskets like a small city drawn by a child. The third held a single banker's box with a wide strip of red evidence tape and my badge number printed cleanly on a label. Echo sat and stared. He did not look at me for approval. He did not look at the cage like it was a game. He looked the way he does when he has tracked something as far as it can be tracked. It is a face that says the rest is yours. I cut the tape because if a thing is named for you, it has already found your skin. Inside sat a radio that matched mine, a duty weapon wrapped in blue shop towel, and a collar tag stamped Echo with a smear the color of rust, not bright, just old. There was no smell of iron. There was the smell of kennel soap and the faint mint that comes off new paper. Under the metal rested a single sheet printed off our case system with a case number I did not recognize and a date that belonged to 2 weeks from Thursday. Narrative section blank. Evidence logged. Handler notified. Status pending. I could feel the room lean. I told Echo heel, and he did not. He rose and put his paws on the edge of the cage door, just enough to make it rattle again. The radio in the box cracked without power and let out a single syllable that was not a word, the way a person might begin to say Daniel and stop to check the room for someone else. I lifted the collar tag. The hole where the split ring goes had been pulled oblong by force. I could imagine the scenario a mind invents when paper gives an outline. I refused it. Echo took the tag from my hand very gently and held it like a retrieve he did not want to release. By 0142, I had lost the room. Word travels in stations faster than wind. 2 officers I liked began avoiding us because Echo's stare made their shoulders rise. One joked that I was bringing a broken dog into quiet places and scaring dust into crimes. Another asked Delaney whether Echo would be retired early for temperament. I kept my chin tidy and my reports tidier. I took Echo to the sterile training bay, white tile, bleach smell, no distractions, no ghost for miles, and told him to search. He put his nose to the grout, then raised his head and growled at the air as if the tile had learned name. I tried the sensible lie. Maybe Echo had poisoned himself on fentanyl dust or meth residue in a place that had not been cleaned right. We did the full workup. Pupils, paws, blood, nose. Our vet tech shook her head and told Echo he was the kind of good that makes her job boring. I took him back to the bay, and he growled in the exact same spots as before, 2 corners and the middle of the room where no corner belongs. His timing matched the radio hiss on my vest. I counted and wrote it down and did not like the fact that my script now included the line Echo growls when time hiccups. The reflection seed paid off in the most ordinary cruelty. In a dark window near the annex stair, my face did not keep up with me. The figure in the glass held Echo's leash and stood a half step behind me while I stood still. The person in the reflection was not me. Same height, different weight of shoulders. The leash in their hand was woven leather, not my nylon. Echo looked at the window and did not growl. He did that low whine puppies make when sleep catches them by surprise and home smells like a person. The evidence tag with no case number earned its meaning when I slid it under the scanner at my desk. The system flagged it as reserved. The reservation belonged to a case that had not been opened. The reserve box matched the box in the cage in a room that did not exist on the active floor plan. I stare at the map the way you stare at a word you have spelled your whole life and suddenly do not recognize. When I looked up, Echo had his chin on my knee. He's not allowed that in the office. I let him because the rules I was breaking felt bigger than the ones I could be caught for. I'm not proud of the next choice, and I am not sorry. I decided to follow Echo completely. No calls, no cadences, radio low, GPS off. I told myself it would be 1 hour, then 2, then until the power test at 0300, because if a city is going to look at its own dark for a minute, that minute is a thing a dog deserves to narrate. Echo took me back to the annex like the path had been chalked on the pavement in a color only dogs can see. The fence lifted politely again. The door sighed like before. The cages hummed like a refrigerator whose compressor is thinking of waking. Inside, the air was colder and the damp paper smell had grown teeth. The box in our cage bore a new strip of tape. Someone had initialed it with letters my hand could have made. Echo pawed the mesh once, then twice, and I undid the chain I had looped there myself an hour earlier. The file had been supplemented. A photo I did not remember taking showed Echo and me at the river mouth lot, my arm around his neck, his tongue out, and eyes on me, and in the corner of the frame a second hand, holding the leash from a different angle, which should not happen without another person and a second dog. The second hand had a scar on the thumb shaped like a keyhole. The radio in the box spoke again, this time in a whisper built from interference. "Heel," it said, the way instructors say it when they want to remind a handler what words sound like when they are obeyed. Echo did not heel. He pushed his head into the crook of my knee and held me in place while the fluorescent somewhere above us flickered 4 times and then steadied. The duty weapon in the towel looked like a prop. My own sidearm was holstered, warm from my hip. The fear that would have made a younger version of me pull out did not show up. The older version understood that there is nothing to point at when the room itself is leaning. I took Echo's collar in my hand and said we were leaving. The door to the annex room closed behind us with a softness I did not love. The hall beyond had grown a new angle, and my flashlight found it like a tooth fine to seed. Echo made a low sound I have only heard twice, once when he found a lost kid under a porch, and once when he found a raccoon in a trap someone set without kindness. He led me to a cracked window that gave a view of the lot where the chain link was sagging. In a glass, the stranger held his leash. The stranger smiled, small and guilty. Echo's whine sharpened into a warning. The twist snuck in with the plainest sentence of the night. Echo was not trying to keep me out. He was pulling me toward the truth that I was already inside. The file on the cage was not a threat. It was a receipt. Evidence logged. Handling notified. The collar tag in the box did not foretell a death. It recorded a choice I had not admitted to yet. In a thin reflection just right on my shoulder, I saw a date stamp flash and die. Echo placed his paw on my boot, a pressure I could feel in my ankle bones, and I understood in the bare bones way that this was the kind of case that writes you, not one you write. You want action, a door broken, a chase. What I can give you is a quiet pressure and a more dangerous math. If I logged the box, it would seal what the locker wanted. If I left it, it would rewrite itself without me, and I would learn about it later from a trainee with an open face and too many questions. I took the collar tag and slid it into my breast pocket. Immediate consequence, a weight that made my heart beat in a new place. Delayed echo, a report I will one day have to answer for when a supervisor asks why a piece of evidence went missing and someone else says it showed up again inside my locker. At 0259, the power test came early. The building inhaled and forgot to exhale. Darkness gathered itself and sat like a cat. Echo leaned into me, all muscle and training and breath. And in the dark, the radio made that throat noise and said Daniel in the voice of someone practicing a word before giving it away. I said here, which is not protocol, but it is how you answer when your dog says your name without speaking. The stranger in the glass did not disappear. He raised a hand as if to hail a cab in a city where cabs fear dogs. Echo bared teeth. I have only ever seen pointed at people who meant to harm someone who did not deserve it. The lights returned in slices. The annex hummed like a machine preparing for company. The cages in the room behind us clinked once each, a roll call. Echo tugged me toward the door to the yard, and I let him because not letting him felt like choosing the version where the room writes the final word. We step in a night that tasted like coins. The chain link turned from sag to taut. Behind us, something shifted its weight in the room with the cages, and I heard faint panting that did not belong to Echo or to me. It matched the rhythm in the training bay that afternoon where there had been no corners to hide in. We sealed the gap with a length of wire I found on the ground, which is a joke, but sometimes jokes hold. Echo would not heal. He walked at my knee like a partner who knows the exit better than you do. The badge in my pocket felt like a coin from another country. When we reached the cruiser, the radio decided to try words again. Case opened, it said, or maybe I wanted to hear that. I looked at Echo and asked if we were done. He huffed and put his head on my thigh, which is not obedience, it is a benediction. In the morning, facilities put a new lock on the annex and added a second chain because more is how people believe in security. No one mentioned a cage with my box in it. The floor plan updated itself without the room. Delaney told me to file my notes and keep Echo off calls with kids until we were sure he was not broken by something my stubbornness had done. 2 officers asked if Echo was retiring. I answered no with a voice that told him to move on before I kept talking and said things I would have to own twice. At night, Echo still growls at mirrors and hallways where all the faces should be ours. He still refuses heal when the air shifts and the radio considers a word it cannot decide is safe to say. In the kennel, he sleeps with one ear cocked toward a corner that every dog before him has ignored. I keep thinking the panting I hear behind me is my own breath hitting a wall and coming back. Sometimes it matches my pace. Sometimes it does not. If a dog you trust becomes stubborn in the places where buildings remember things, pay attention to his refusal as if it were a sentence about to be spoken. If he brings you an evidence tag with no number, understand that paperwork can be a trap and a map at the same time. If your radio hisses when his throat does, notice the synchronization and count it under your breath like a prayer. And if you see your reflection with a leash in a hand that is not yours, ask whose case you have walked into and whether you're ready to be filed correctly. Now we move to the 8th story, if you're still walking with us in the dark. Which detail followed you down the hall this time? Echo pinning me at the alley, the blank tag that scanned as reserved, or the stranger in the glass who knew how to hold my dog? Tell me in the comments. Story 8. The case file that wrote back the handwriting showed up before I uncapped my pen. Fresh ink rose on the first page of the folder in front of me, letters blooming like bruises under a desk lamp hum. It wrote my name in a neat block print that looked exactly like mine, only tidier, and then paused as if it could hear my breath. If you have ever watched a pen move without a hand, you know the part of the brain that loves rules starts to back away from the table. I told myself I was tired. I told myself the mildew smell in the file room was just old paper. The page wrote a second word. Open. Night shift paperwork is the grind that keeps the city's memory honest. We write the story no one will read unless something goes wrong. I am Detective Arya Nolan, and closing is my vice. It feels like sleep to other people. My father retired out of this same bullpen with a box of plaques and a handful of cases that never quite shut. I tell myself I am not trying to prove anything when I stay late. Lamp halo pouring into a pool of coffee. The truth is louder. I cannot leave a thing unfinished without it leaning against me all night. Unknown before danger keeps you polite. I make a ledger whenever a call tilts, a habit my father taught me with a coin under his cigarette pack. Seed 1. A ballpoint on my desk rolled toward the folder without a draft and stopped at the corner like a dog that knows where it belongs. Payoff note says the pen will write my name unaided. Seed 2. The first page references an interview I had finished hours earlier. Payoff note says the file is live, not archived. Seed 3. A margin in faint blue says check the mirror. Payoff note says a lag in the reflection means I've already been recorded. I wrote the ledger in the back of my notebook, then laughed at myself for narrating my own dread. The folder was blank on the tab. White sticker, no case number, only the word open typed in all caps. Someone had a sense of humor. I lifted the cover and a scratch sounded thin and dry, like nib on paper. The first line formed with patient strokes. Detective Arya Nolan sits down at 12:47 a.m., right side desk by the lamp that hums. Her coffee smells like burnt almonds. She rubs her wrist. She's thinking of her father. I rub my wrist because the line told me to, then felt foolish because I had already been doing it. The file added a sentence. Do not look in the mirror yet. My desk sits across from the station restroom door. The mirror in there is cheap glass that keeps a smudge just left of center. I stood anyway, told myself I needed water, and stared anyhow. My reflection held still a half second too long. My mouth opened a beat behind my breath. It felt like watching someone learn to lip sync. The file on my desk rustled. The pen rolled off the edge and stopped midair as if a trick had a budget, then dropped and clattered. That was my first micro cliffhanger, a person and a page trying to catch each other in the act. When the file wrote, the smell shifted. Mildew darkened like rain under a tarp. My father used to say, paper has a breath. If it stops, the case is lying. I touched the margin. The ink smudged onto my finger and dried fast, gritty. The second page wrote a question. How many open cases need to breathe through you tonight? I whispered a number without thinking. 8. The folder wrote back. 9. Beat 1 began with the file getting louder than dispatch. My radio was low on my hip, barely a whisper. The page wrote a location, a liquor store on Farnham, a clerk with his hands in the air, a suspect in a dark hoodie asking for the safe, a detail about a limp from a high school football injury. I stared at the clock. 12:59. The call came in at 1:01, almost word for word like the city had practiced on paper before speaking. Isen units wila reding afayet. The note added in the margin said the suspect will run left. I copied it to my pad because I hate testing the universe with officers. The suspect ran left. I hate being right when I do not know how I am right. Beat 2, the folder learned my bones. It wrote about my father's habit of counting lights on the drive home. It wrote about the ugly ceramic rabbit that sits on my kitchen counter because the person I used to love bought it for a laugh. It wrote the note I typed into my phone last week and never sent to anyone. Tonight, I will finish the box Dad could not. The page added the word please in my father's handwriting, the looped lowercase that looks like knots. My chest hurt the way it does when a good memory clicks the wrong way round. Beat 3, the file started talking over me. I said copy to a unit, and the page wrote copy before my lips made the C. I stood to stretch, and the line formed standing. I reached for my pen, and the word reached appeared. Then the file got rude. It wrote the sentence I was about to say to myself, and ended it with a period, and I did say it, and I hated how tidy the page made me. The pen scratched on the desk by itself, no paper under it, and drew my signature that I use at the bottom of forms. My jaw clenched. I set the pen down. It wrote my father's signature neatly under mine. You can hide a problem for a while. I slid the folder under last quarter's narcotics reports and stacked a mug on the pile to keep it from breathing. The lamp hum rose, then steadied, like the building woke and calmed itself. I told myself to be normal. I typed an email about a witness interview. My radio sang the end of a fire call. Across the room, someone swore at a paper jam. I drank coffee that tasted old. Then a line bled through the narcotics report above the folder in a faint gray. Officer Chun will drop her stapler in 3, 2, 1. The stapler hit the floor. Isolation arrives as paperwork that looks like kindness. A reassignment memo slid into my inbox at 1:34. Your desk will be temporarily reassigned to Officer Marquez while we reconfigure the bullpen. Please relocate to the overflow room. The overflow room is what we call a closet with 2 chairs and a haunted fan. The folder rode on the stack as I carried it, and the pen under the stack rolled in time with my steps. I refuse to laugh because when I laugh, the night thinks it has me. In the overflow room, the air felt wet even though the fan whirred. The file wrote welcome. I tried the red herring because it kept me feeling like a detective instead of a character. Someone was feeding me information. Id din camera. Microphone. A partner with a sense of humor and access to unit trackers. I cracked the folder open beside the old fax machine and wrote a line in the margin. Prove it. The file wrote back. The double homicide at Baxter will begin. Then it wrote the time, 1:47, and the detail that the front door will be locked from inside and the back window will be sticky with old paint. I checked the board. Nothing. The radio stayed quiet for 2 minutes that felt like chewing. Then dispatch paged a welfare check at Baxter that turned to forced entry that turned to a scene that the file had already summed up in a cold sentence. Revelation is rude when it is simple. The file was not recording what happened. It was deciding what we would be allowed to call real. I stared at the words "the back window will be sticky" and thought about how many times I had written a tidy note on a form and then acted surprised when the world obeyed. I had a choice I did not want. I could refuse to read another line and call ignorance a strategy. I could keep reading and admit I had an obligation to test it. I could try to steer it. The ticking element chose for me. The top corner of the next page typed 3:11 a.m. in the header, bold and crisp. I wrote in the file. I admit that. I took my pen and wrote something small in the margin, an edit, a tweak that felt like cheating a vending machine. The case at the warehouse will be interrupted by a neighbor's complaint about noise. The ink shimmered and settled. I waited for my phone to ring, because one of those neighbors always calls a personal cell when they want results fast. The call came a minute later. A woman on gray told me someone was banging on a door at the warehouse across the alley. I closed my eyes and heard my father say, "This is not the kind of help that forgives you," and I opened them and wrote another test, and the page swallowed it like it had been hungry for years. The dread loop tightened. Hint, wait, escalate, partial answer. Each time I wrote, the city moved a fraction toward my line. Each time the file wrote, my hand twitched like it wanted to keep up. I scribbled a note to myself on a yellow sticky. Stop. I stuck it to the desk. The pen scratched across the sticky and changed the word to later. I let out a laugh that tasted like pennies, and the lamp hummed in approval. I put a line through the page that wrote Detective Nolan leans in too close, and the line became part of a sentence that said Detective Nolan bends rules for a taste of closure. At 2:41, my father's name appeared on the page. Not a mention. A title, as if he were subject now. Retired Detective Thomas Nolan calls at 2:43 and says he cannot sleep. Asked him what he would do. I stared at the phone. I did not call him. It rang anyway. He asked if I was still at the desk. He told me to get rest, and I could hear him shuffling the coins he always kept in his left pocket to pace his thoughts. I wanted to say, "Did you ever have a case that learned to write back?" And I did not ask because some gifts you do not throw on the floor. At 2:53, the file turned the page without my hand. It wrote my name at the top of the case number. That was a soft joke. 0000. It labeled me status pending. It wrote an offense type that made my stomach lurch. Self-endangerment by narrative interference. I wrote stop in the margin hard enough to tear the paper. The tear did not stay. The fibers knit like they remembered how. A line formed again. Detective Nolan attempts to alter the record. The record absorbs the attempt. I looked at the mirror in the overflow room, a cheap rectangle with a yellowing edge. My reflection blinked after me, 2 blinks behind, like a child catching up. Point of no return wears a tiny face. I wrote one more change, meaner this time. Detective Nolan does not die tonight. The letters lay black and calm. Under them, faint gray lines appeared, as if something was trying out different sentences before choosing one. The file wrote a correction. Detective Nolan will be recorded in error at 3:11 a.m. as deceased at desk. Cause listed as undetermined. The pen rolled toward my hand. The fan clicked off without me touching it. The room held its breath. I pictured walking away and leaving the folder on the chair, the page writing my walk anyway. The file wrote the word "sit down." Climax does not bang, it accumulates. Text spilled past the edge of the paper and wrote across the laminate of the desk, tidy black letters that did not care about the idea of clean surfaces. It wrote my name in the minute and the second. It wrote the words "pulses weak" and then stopped, as if to let me breathe. I grabbed the bottle of whiteout someone left on the shelf and dragged it across the line. The paint dried and the letters bled through as if a wet paper towel had never been my friend. I scratched over the words with my pen, chaotic loops that would humiliate a child. The ink soaked my finger, then my palm, then drew a line up the vein that my doctor likes to find first. I stood and the chair skidded back. The page wrote stand, chair skids back. I said "oh no" and heard my voice from the desk say "oh no" a half second before me. The radio chirped and repeated my call sign in my own tone, then played silence, which is worse than laughter. I tried to think of a thing that would break a pattern. I turned the lamp off. The text kept writing in the light from the hall. I covered the desk with the overflow room calendar, an inspirational glossy with a mountain and the word perseverance. The letters crawled up the image and rode across the sky. The time in the header clicked forward. 3:09. Twist is a dirty word. It excuses a lot of damage. The truth was simpler and uglier than a haunting. The file was an archive for people like me, officers who do not stop arranging the world until it agrees. It fed on our need for closure by letting us have it until the closure closed on us. The pen scratching at night in an empty file room was the sound of officers being cataloged the way we cataloged evidence. The mildew smell was not just paper. It was the damp of things left too long unshelved, people and stories and names drying into useful shapes. I looked at my hands. The ink on my skin had sunk into lines and was spelling my last name in a faint, embarrassed gray. I grabbed the folder and walked it to the restroom mirror. If the reflection lag confirmed I was already written, I wanted to see whether speed could help. The mirror did a trick for me I did not ask for. It showed me already holding the folder against my chest in the way people hold something they plan to hide. I held it a half second later and felt the ache of being late to my own body. I told my reflection to slow down. It did not hear me until after the sentence had become past tense. The file on my arms warmed like a thing with a pulse. At 3:10, I wrote into the folder as fast as I could. I wrote nonsense for a page. I wrote a nursery rhyme my father hates. I wrote the serial number of my service weapon and my badge and the plate for my first car. The file ignored the letters and wrote around them, the way floods ignore sandbags in the end. I wrote an instruction that felt like a prayer. Write nothing for 1 minute. The page added a line that said request denied, and then it did something small and cruel. It wrote my father's name again and added the words "will sleep soundly." The building shifted. Fan on, fan off. The copier in the hall lit and then dimmed. The radio made a quiet throat sound that I heard earlier tonight in a different story about a dog. My lungs want to count. I let them. 7 breaths. 8. 9. The file used the pause to shape letters so neatly it broke my heart. Detective Nolan is found at 3:11 a.m. by Officer Marquez. She looks as if she has fallen asleep. The ink bled through to the back of the page and onto my wrist again, then along my pulse in a way that made a thought dangerous. If I move my hand, will the line change? I put my palm flat on the desk and pressed as if I could erase a word by physically owning the surface. The pen scratched one more sentence into the wood. Detective Nolan refuses to leave a thing unfinished. The mirror in the restroom showed me with my hand already down. When I lifted it, the letters had dried under my skin like old news transfer. I spoke my name aloud because sometimes names are keys. The file wrote the name in the shape of a key and then made a line like a lock. At 3:11 a.m. exactly, nothing theatrical happened. My heart did not stop. My vision did not dim. What happened was smaller and worse. The file stopped writing. The air lost the mildew edge and became only air. The lamp hum evened. My reflection caught up, matching me like a partner who has forgiven you for stepping on their shoe. I stood and expected to fall. I did not. I waited for Marquez to open the door. She did not. The time ticked to 3:12, and the file remained a folder that said open. Fallout does not announce itself either. I hid the folder in the bottom drawer that sticks and went home while the sky was a color that makes you doubt your choices. I slept in my chair because my bed felt like a place you go to lie about morning. At 10 a.m., a rookie sent me a photo from the bullpen. A blank folder sat on her desk under the lamp we all share when the bulbs die. The tab said open. She added a laughing emoji because the new ones do that when fear and humor tie a knot. I wrote back a thumbs up because I did not know how to write run. Sometimes late now, in the overflow room or at my kitchen table, I hear a pen scratching across a surface that I did not put paper on. It is small and patient, a sound that understands time at a speed I refuse to live at. If you sit with me, then you will see me put my finger to my wrist and feel for letters that may have darkened. You will see me look at the mirror and wait for the lag. You will hear me tell myself that closure is a kind of hunger and that hungry things rarely share. If you ever find a folder on your desk with a tab that says open and no case number, listen to the room before you lift the cover. Notice if the lamp hum changes when you touch the edge. Look at your reflection and see if it loves you enough to keep up. If a pen rolls toward your hand without a draft, do not be flattered. If the file writes a sentence you have not lived yet, ask who gets to own that future if you let it be true. And if you write into the file and the world obeys, stop while it still feels like cheating. The difference between writing and being written is smaller than a minute. Now we move to the 9th story. If your desk lamp is still humming and your mirror still loves you back, which detail stayed under your skin? The ink under the wrist, the mirror that waited, or the line that wrote my father sleeping soundly? Tell me in the comments. Story 9. The station with no clocks, the first thing they told me about 3rd Precinct was where to park and where not to leave my lunch. No one mentioned the clocks. Maybe they forgot. Maybe the building trained them to. I noticed it walking in with my transfer box balanced on my hip and a list of shift goals buzzing in my head. The wall above the duty roster had a pale circle where a clock once lived. Another empty hook waited above the bullpen door. The fluorescence hummed like hell breath. If you've ever worked in a room that doesn't measure time, your skin does the counting for you, and it never quite adds up. I'm Officer Renee Calloway. I organize my day in 15-minute blocks because chaos makes my chest feel small. New shift, new precinct, same overtime rules, I told myself. I touched my watch like a talisman before pushing through the glass, and the second hand shivered once, then stopped. The battery had been fine in the car. By the time I reached the sergeant's desk, the minute hand had drooped like a tired eyelid. He slid me a clipboard and welcomed me to the graveyard. Behind him, a desk calendar showed the wrong date with stubborn confidence, and no one seemed to mind. Unknown before danger is how you stay honest. I made a quiet ledger in my head, the way I had since academy. Seed 1. Every clock I can see is missing or dead. Payoff note. Someone's prank or a fire code violation with poor follow-through. Seed 2. My watch dies on entry. Payoff note. Strong magnets at the door or a coincidence with bad manners. Seed 3. The west windows show night even though sunrise should be tipping the roofs. Payoff note. Tinted glass or denial. I wrote the notes on a sticky, then lost the sticky between forms, which felt like the first tiny subtraction. Dispatch keyed up as I signed the roster. Calloway, good to have you. You're already on for 19 hours. The room actually laughed. It was that tired cop laugh. That means please don't start. Just got here, I said, keeping my voice light. The CAD showed me green for an entire block of time I did not live yet. Sergeant Kemp squinted at the screen, then shrugged like paperwork had grown a mood. System lags, he said. It'll catch up. The fluorescents above the break room blinked 3 times and stayed on, as if they just remembered they were supposed to be. The calendar and records leaned on the same date like a stubborn knee. Thursday. The page was thick from being turned back and back again. I flipped it forward while Reba from Windows signed out forms. She didn't blink at me touching her calendar. It slid forward to Friday under my thumb. Then, when I let go, slipped quietly back to Thursday like gravity had grown preferences. You'll get used to it, Reba said. She didn't look up. She stamped my request with a date that doesn't exist. June 31st, ink crisp and blue. I wrote it on a note to see if it would change later. It didn't. In booking, the old ledger lived in a drawer everyone pretended we didn't have. I like old things that don't lie as efficiently as new ones. The entries had dates like April 00 and February 29th in a non-leap year, and I could hear my training officer's voice in my head asking what story those numbers think they're telling. On the corridor wall, a frame hung empty except for the ghost of another clock, a clean circle on a dirty square. The evidence room door had a new keypad, a bandage on a wound that wouldn't close. The hum of the ceiling lights burrowed behind my eyes. You learn a precinct by listening to how people misremember together. Didn't we just do Monday? An officer asked, sorting citations into piles all labeled today. Someone else said her weekend was coming and her face didn't agree. A rookie tried to recall his last day off and landed on a baseball game that happened last summer. I laugh with them because being the new transfer who doesn't laugh is worse than being the one who asks why the windows show night at noon. The west hallway had no west. When I tried to orient myself, the map on the wall felt like a joke with an expensive frame. I ducked into the women's locker room to swap my dead watch for my backup. The door closed on a hinge that remembered being new. The second hand on the spare ticked, as if relieved to be chosen. I stepped back into the hall, took 2 breaths, and felt the watch shiver the way a small animal does when you whisper. It stopped at 7:12, which could have been anything. I looked up at the frosted windows above the report line. Night stared in, thick and patient, as if the glass backed onto a parking lot where the sun had never been introduced. First disturbance locked into place at 0143 or 0121 or some hour the station preferred. Dispatch pinged me to confirm I was still on. Copy, I said. Hour 3. 19, she repeated back. We'll get you relief. Negative, I said a little too quick. My credibility lives in the difference between minutes. If I can't keep track of where my shift ends, I can't argue for where it begins. The CAD logged my acknowledgement 3 times in 3 different colors. The buzzing over my head dipped, rose, then held as if a hand on a dimmer switch had decided to be merciful for a breath. I started asking quiet questions. When was your last day off? To a detective with a salt and pepper beard who always had a pen behind his ear. Soon, he said, eyes a polite gray. I've got tickets for something. What day? I asked. He looked toward the west windows that had no day and smiled the way you do when you don't want to hurt a child. In the break room, the microwave's number pad blinked 88:88 until someone shut its door firmly. The coffee tasted like metal and patience. My body wanted to sleep in the edges between paragraphs. I put 2 sugars in and wrote on my palm, count the calendars. Beat 1 was officers losing their weekends in conversation. Beat 2 lived behind a lock. The evidence lockers held the station's memory in neat rows of gray doors. When the clerk swung 12C open for me, a silver drape of watch bands and broken clocks slid forward like a tide. Winders had been pulled. Digital faces showed lines where numbers used to belong. Sticky notes labeled them. Found in Lieutenant Simon's desk. Recovered from lost and found. Removed from wall for repair. Every hour that a clock had frozen had made a small, private claim. 311 appeared more than once, which is either a coincidence or the universe clearing its throat. Why hold on to dead clocks? I asked, trying to be casual and failing. Property policy, The clerk said, "No one wants them back. No one wants to throw them out." He left the door open to breathe, and the smell of old metal and dust patted down the hallway like shoes. I set my dead watch on the shelf as a joke and saw my reflection in the locker door smile, a beat behind. The fluorescence above us flickered and stayed. The hum made my teeth want to meet in a new way. "Does anyone fix them?" I asked, knowing the answer. "We had a guy," he said, and let the sentence decide to end there. Beat 3 arrived on a screen. "Calloway," Sergeant Kim called. "You're very good at being everywhere." He spun his monitor toward me. Body cam footage from 2 nights ago played. My name in the corner. My feet in the frame. My voice asking a man to step back with his hands visible. I was off that night, in a motel 2 towns over signing lease papers with a landlady who said her nephew was a plumber. I could describe the pattern on the bedspread. The footage showed me turning the corner by Domer Alley and shining a light into a window with the shade half drawn. I have never walked Domer Alley. Isolation comes in layers so thin you only see them when the light catches. The jokes slowed around me. A woman from traffic asked if I liked messing with the punch clock. I told her I hadn't touched it. "Exactly," she said, and smiled like we were on a show. The daily assignments roster printed my name for a shift I did not sign. The exit to the side lot looped me back into records, where Reba stamped the same date and didn't look up. I tried the back doors, the fire escape, the roll-up at the garage. Each turn returned me to the main hallway under the empty hook where a clock should have been brave. Choice pressure sat on my shoulder and breathed. Walk out and risk sounding superstitious forever. Stay and risk becoming the story all the tired laughter is about. Banks of fluorescent lights hummed the way power lines do in summer. I checked my phone for time like a sinner checking windows in a church, and the battery read blank, then full. Then the phone asked me if I wanted to set up as new. I turned it off. The station breathed in and held it. Somewhere a printer began to chew and would not let go of the page. Red herring time. I thought that looked smart. Carbon monoxide leak, everyone foggy, memory loops, a building quietly killing us in polite increments. I found the detector on the wall near the break room, a little white square with a green eye. I pressed test. It chirped once instead of singing. "We replaced those last month," someone said, then frowned because last month did not land anywhere for her either. I told myself the numbers in the ledger would lead me to an answer you could submit under sworn statement. The ledger yawned and rolled onto its other side like a dog. I tried something messier. I followed the version of me in the body cam footage by foot. Domer Alley is a block behind the precinct, the kind of narrow that collects wind and lost receipts. The night behind the frosted windows was the same here, thick and dignified. I stood where the frame showed me, standing, and lifted my light. The empty pane reflected me and the window behind me in the hallway at the same time, as if the glass were bored with chronology. In the reflection, I watched myself hand a form to someone with my face. She didn't look up. Her hair was wrong by one stubborn curl. Revelation doesn't care if you're ready. The station is eating time and spitting out schedules, I said out loud, because sometimes saying it pushes it away. The alley moved at its old, honest pace. The thought stayed. This building was a sinkhole for hours, chewing them soft, swallowing what it could get and nudging the rest back toward us in loops we could sign. If you need that in clean language, I couldn't give it to a judge. But my knees knew it like weather. The calendar's insistence, the repeat dates, the frozen watches, the body cam me. The hungry hum over the break room door. I went back inside with a bad idea dressed as bravery. If time was the leash, drop the leash. I took off my backup watch in the locker room and crushed it against the bench until the face cracked and the hands fell into the little snow of glass. The second hand skittered under a locker and made a sound that felt like a coin deciding. I did not check the time on my phone again. I tore the corner from the wrong date calendar and put in my pocket like a witness that would not testify. Immediate consequence. For 2 hallways, I felt lighter. Delayed echo. I had no anchor when the bell tolled. I hadn't heard a bell since Academy, and we didn't have a bell. At least, not one you could point to. It started low, then rolled up the stairwell like a ship announcing arrival. In the bullpen, heads lifted and then didn't acknowledge they had. The fluorescents fluttered like startled birds and then stayed, humming. I ran on a line that felt rehearsed, turning left, turning right, arriving in rooms where I had already been. The conference room glass showed me at 3 tables at once, filling out the same form, each of me chewing the end of the same pen with the same small grimace. I pushed past one of me, and she didn't look up. Her writing had a leftward slant mine has on days I'm trying not to rush. Across the hall, another me logged traffic cones into a property form and initialed in little neat letters. In booking, I handed myself a report and didn't meet my own eyes. The calendar on the wall insisted on Thursday. The booking ledger had a page that ended in the middle of a sentence, and the next page continued that same sentence with equal confidence a line down. My chest felt too shallow to fit a breath, and the hum leaned into check. The windows in the stairwell should have taken a gray morning and made it cordless. They held only night, healthy and deep. I yelled for Sergeant Kemp, and the building swallowed the last syllable in polite increments. In the evidence corridor, the locker doors stood open like mouths. The pile of watches had grown teeth. Hands jittered toward numbers and stuck, jittered and stuck, each choosing a second like a favorite child. I counted 3 faces stopped at 311, then told myself to stop counting because the counting made it worse, and the counting made it impossible not to count. If you've ever been in a place that updates you while refusing to change, you know the angle your shoulders learn. I stepped into records and found Reba stamping a page blank, then stamping it again, then stamping it again, as if the word itself were the job. I touched the calendar and it snapped to Friday under my finger, then slid back to Thursday when I exhaled. I saw myself in the glass of the copy machine, wearing a jacket I don't own, hair wrong, eyes busy. I said my name. The reflection said it a beat later, as if reading from a line. You expect screaming and running and someone grabbing your arm. That's TV. This was paperwork that never ends in a room with no clocks asking you to be polite about it. I walked to the duty roster and signed my name out with a line that felt like a small theft. The paper accepted the pen. The board accepted the marker. The room made its hum larger and then smaller, like approval has a waveform. I turned the handle of the side exit and stepped into the hall by the empty clock hook. The door clicked behind me with the same manners as always. The bell tolled again, the long kind of sound that makes your teeth have a conversation. The copies of me did not look up. The shift logs on the sergeant's desk printed my name onto tomorrow and then onto yesterday in neat black lines. The evidence lockers whispered with metal like weather. I stood in the middle of the bullpen and realized the station didn't need me to believe anything. It needed me to sit down. It needed me to fill the same box on the same form and initial like an adult. It needed me to become a moving part in the machine that pretended hours were obedient. I thought about the ledger in my head, the one I used to make chaos smaller. Unknown before danger, dread loop, stakes ladder. The stakes were simple now. Credibility, sanity, body. In that order, then all at once. I could stand and hum until my throat matched the lights, or I could leave a mark that meant something to me, even if it meant nothing here. I took a marker and wrote on the empty clock hook, time. My letters looked like a child's note on a refrigerator. The hum vibrated through the marker into my hand. A whisper came from somewhere a filing cabinet might live. It doesn't help. I sat, not because the building asked, but because my legs were shaking. The form on the desk was familiar, the kind that waves its own instructions at you like a flag. I filled the top line. Name, badge, date. The date printed itself under my pen. Thursday. I wrote Friday over it, and the ink thinned, and the paper drank it, and the word blurred, and became Thursday again, obedient as a dog. I laughed once, because sometimes laughter is the last clean gesture you can choose. The room liked that. The hum softened, and the bell didn't ring for a while. When a new transfer arrived the next day, what we call the day because your body needs to name things, she stood in the doorway with a box on her hip and blinked at the pale circles on the walls. She touched her watch like we all do when we pretend we don't. The second hand made a small, homey move and then consider its options. I wrote her name on the assignment roster because someone had to. She smiled that brave, professional smile, and tucked hair behind her ear like she was about to run. Behind her, the west windows showed a patient night and a precinct that never needed clocks to count what it keeps. I did not look up. I filled out the same form again, neat as prayer, and initialed in a little boat of ink that will outlive the people at records. The fluorescents hummed approval, and the calendar insisted we were fine. In the glass of the copy machine, I saw the new transfer's face become a reflection that smiled a beat late. My pen moved. The room breathed. Somewhere in the building, a pile of watches chose their seconds and practiced stopping. If you've ever wondered what it feels like to be held inside a schedule instead of writing one, it feels like this. It feels like a room that never learned to tell you when to go. Now we move to the 10th story. If your lights are still humming and your watch hasn't slipped a second, which detail stuck with you tonight? The dead watches in the locker, the door that loops you back inside, or the bell that tolls without a bell? Tell me in the comments. Story 10. The last ride to county. They say the last thing you hear in the transport van is not a siren. It's the cage humming like a tuned string, and the rain drawing straight lines down the windshield, as if time itself were being pulled long. We left the lot in a wet ribbon of sodium light. The belts in the back were damp and smelled like river nylon. If you have ever driven a prisoner van in hard rain, you know how the echo settles in your teeth and how the wipers beat a rhythm your heart wants to match. The manifest on my clipboard was clean. The cage hummed. The rain fell perfectly vertical, no matter the wind. That was the first thing that wasn't right. My name is Julian Hart. I count. It's how I keep the job quiet. My partner, Mia Calder, says I trust paper more than people. She's probably right. I can recognize half our regulars by cough and shoes, yet I checked the signatures twice and the faces once. Tonight should have been simple. 2 pickups at the South substation, 1 at the hospital, and a straight shot to county. The rumor rides with us anyway. The rumor says the van returns with everything technically correct, except one voice is missing from roll call. I never checked the rumor because rumors don't sign manifests. Unknown before danger keeps you honest. 3 details slipped under my door before we hit the freeway. First, the manifest had 6 names under detainees when the bench seats were fitted for 5. The 7th line under escort carried a deputy's name neither of us recognized. Second, the rain fell in vertical bars even when we turned east and the crosswind should have bent it. Third, tucked in a glove box was a county intake sheet already stamped received for 1:33 with tonight's date. I stared at the stamp long enough to feel something in my ribs flicker. Mia tapped the paper with 2 fingers and said, "We haven't even waved goodbye to the lot." We loaded it south and the hospital with as little fuss as you can when moving tired humans in metal cuffs. The cage's breath felt warm. The guy in position 3, eyes like old glass, said my full name. Not Hart. He said, Julian Michael Hart, and smiled like he'd just remembered a song. I kept my voice soft. I told him names were not information he needed. He nodded and repeated my middle name without hurry. That a file thing, I thought. That's not a street thing. The wipers ticked. The rain drew straight lines. The verticals made the road look like it was being read. Dispatch checked us out. Transport en route, I said, steady as a countertop. We hit mile marker 19, and the radio murmured, cheerful as an office. Copy. County confirms arrival. I said our location again, a little louder. The radio repeated, arrival confirmed, 1:33. Mia and I shared a look with no emojis. She adjusted the rear view and squinted at the cage. She's good at noticing what I train myself not to. The breath on the back bench had a second rhythm between 2 bodies we could see. The shackles on the far left swayed in a lazy arc like someone had just settled. We rolled anyway. You roll, because there are rules bigger than your spook. The road shone like a long fish. The van's heater fought the damp and lost. Mia kept jotting on her sleeve because her notebook had learned to hide. The guy in position 1 said he could feel someone breathing next to him. Position 2 swore he heard a laugh without a person attached. Position 5 complained we were running the vent wrong because the air was colder on his left. I adjusted nothing. The rain made its clean lines. When the grade rose, the lines did not slant. It is a small thing until it isn't. Beat 1 escalated in neat clicks. We passed the same billboard twice. Cheap DUI lawyer promising your problem is a clerical error. The second time, the paper had a fresh rip like a grin. The inmates went quiet in the way people do when they're saving their breath for something. The shackles on the empty seat lifted and fell with no knees to tell them when to stop. "Do you hear that?" Mia whispered. She kept her voice low as if the noise could be spooked. We both heard the extra breathing. The breath had a quality I hate knowing now. It sounded patient. It sounded like someone who had learned to be cargo. I checked the mirror and saw Mia in the cage, hair damp, cap on wrong, watching me watch her. Then I glanced right, and she was beside me, hand near the dash, alive and annoyed. I looked back. The mirror still held her in the rear, expression soft like a person who has already agreed to something. I did not scare easy, but I did what any good driver does. I blinked hard and gave myself the slow count. The mirror didn't change. Mia did not comment. She watched the road unkind because it deserved it. I set my jaw until it clicked and said nothing, which is my weakest plan. We hit the highway loop that climbs and curls past the truck stop with the tilted neon. It should have been 2 exits and a bridge. We took it and saw the same gas station with the same flickering pump. The odometer's trip time kissed an hour and then returned to 58 minutes, shy as a bad habit. The manifest on my clipboard updated its own smudges. A new line printed faint as fog under hold. Hart, Julian, no facility, no court date. I rubbed my thumb over the letters and came away with gray. Mia saw the movement and asked me if I'd spilled pencil on myself. I said yes, because the truth sounded like a test. Beat 2-bit down harder. The radio turned mirror trick. When I called in our location, it played our earlier call, same words, same throat grit, and followed with the county's stamped arrival time, as if to be helpful. The road gave us the county gate lights like a gift. We exhaled, then the lights were behind us, in the mirror, like a joke you were not ready to enjoy. The rain kept the bar straight. The van's clock blinked 1:32, then 1:33, then 1:32 again, anxious and polite. Position 3 said my middle name a third time and asked me whether I was the one leaving or the one staying. I told him to face forward. He said he couldn't. He said forward kept moving around. Beat 3 was a hinge. We rolled past mile marker 13 and saw its cousin. 13 with the paint scraped just so, again the next 15 minutes. Then again, the inmates started calling me transfer, not deputy. I said we don't play word games on the chain. Position 5 said this wasn't a game. His cuffs knocked twice, then twice again in a rhythm that sounded like a clock learning to walk. Mia's seatbelt clicked like it learned a new position. She didn't move. When I looked, there were 2 imprints in her cushion, one fresh, one tired. She kept her eyes on the rain. The manifest refreshed itself in my lap. Under detainees, faint and eager, Hart, Julian hold, county. Isolation arrived without drama. Mia spoke my name in a voice that fell far away. Then the sound of her breath cut off and came back layered under the cage hum, as if the van had learned her frequency and was practicing it. Her hat remained on the passenger seat. Her pen rolled into the cup holder with a sound that should be too small to love. I reached for her and found air that had just been warm. The shackles on the left bench rose an inch and fell as if a leg exhaled. I let the van drift to the shoulder and set the brake with both feet flat, as if my stance could hold the road in place. Dispatch did not answer. County did not answer. When they did, they said the run was complete. The voice sounded like ours cut into strips and pasted back together. I tried the horn, and the horn sounded like an argument I'd already lost. Position 1 got brave. He said I should stop pretending I hadn't known from the start. He said I'd been riding the county long before I put the key in. He said we all were. Then he said, "Breathe like it's not you, deputy," which is a sentence I haven't been able to clean out of my head since. You want practical reasons when the air starts lying. I checked the vents. I cracked my window 2 fingers worth and sniffed for a leak. I flashed the thought of the gas at Mia's empty seat, and my throat shut with anger because she was supposed to be eye-rolling next to me about my hunches. The glove box latch had been badly repaired with tape. I tore it. A logbook slid out, old leather, hand-punched. County runs, years of them. Each page stamped received at 1:33. Each entry with a line for officer in charge and a second, smaller line below it for received by. Every page had two names. On some, the second name was the same as the first. On others, like my brother Theo's page, the second line carried his name once, and then someone else's hand had written it again beneath, darker, like an echo. The red herring died quiet. No gas. No prank. No tech trick with speakers. Just paper that outranked my eyes. Mia had told me once that paper isn't neutral. It's a path. Tonight, it was a mouth. I swallowed air that tasted like the inside of a helmet and told the inmates to stay put. They laughed like people who have learned to live with a script. The shackles scraped again, tender as a metronome. In the mirror, the second Mia watched me like she pitted us both. Choice pressure is the step you take when you know both doors are bad. Finish the run blind and risk letting the van claim the next person it wants. Or open the cage and acknowledge the rider everyone is pretending not to see. If I walked it in and signed and turned on my heel, maybe the rumor would pick someone else next time. If I lifted the latch, maybe I could make it my choice instead of papers. I hate both of those sentences. I love one of them more. The one where you choose yourself in the place that plans to choose you. I cut the engine. The rain kept its neat bars. I unlocked the cage. The door gave me the old hinge groan, the kind that admits it's tired and will still carry its half. Inside, on the far bench, in county blues and a deputy's duty jacket someone had folded over his lap to be kind, sat Julian Hart. Me. The face had my bad sleep and my decent shave. He raised his cuffed hands a polite inch and smiled like a person greeting himself in a window after good news. "You're late," he said, and my throat did a thing it hasn't done since I was 10 and heard our father say my full name after I broke something on purpose. "I'm driving," I said. It came out thin. The me in the cage tilted his head as if listening to a station I couldn't catch. "No," he said. "You're arriving." He nodded toward the clipboard on my chest. The manifest had inked itself darker. The Hart, Julian line had slid from faint to confident. Under deputy escort, the strange name remained. Under received by, my own last name was printed in a different hand, looped and patient. The other inmates watched with the soft eyes of men who have paid too much attention to their own endings. "Get up," I said, and reached for the chain to unclip the cuffs. The chain was warm like a wrist has just been learning from it. The cage me stood too easily, as if he already knew the seat's height. We were the same height. He stepped to the threshold, and for a second we stood so close the rain smell braided us together. "One more signature," he said, "then it balances." I looked past him at the empty seat whose shackles had been keeping time. The leather pad held the shape of a person's patience. The rain kept its neat plumb lines, measuring nothing I could use. We did not brawl. This is not a story where men fight themselves into the right timeline. We negotiated like co-workers at a broken machine. I put my hand on his shoulder the way I do to guide a cooperative back toward the bench. He put his hand on mine, palm to palm, and I felt the rough of my own work, the same healed cut at the base of the thumb. He squeezed once. "You're good at counts," he said. "Count the signatures." I did. The intake sheet in the glove box had our run already stamped. Under received, a dozen Julian Harts trailed down the column, some mine, some not mine, all in that looped hand I had not trained. I could have pushed him aside and closed the door and driven on. The road would have given me the county gate lights again and again until paper tired of me. The rumor would have found a better meal next week. I could have put my trust in engine and brake and the clean math of miles. Instead, I made the smallest choice I could survive. I stepped backward into the cage and sat. The seat side. The rain straight bars were close enough to count. He watched me, eyes forgiving because he did not require me to forgive him. "I'll drive," he said gently, and closed the door. The shackles ratcheted with the clean click of a form completed. My wrists felt the metal's memory accept me. The van's engine turned without complaint, as if relieved to be doing the part it understands. The inmates went quiet like a church is happening. The manifest settled into itself and stopped ghosting out new lines. The radio played the cheerful lie again. Arrival confirmed, 1:33, and this time I understood what it expected from me. The cage hummed. The breath on the bench found the bench's rhythm. Mia's hat lay, turned crown up on the passenger seat like a small boat. We rolled. The neon at the truck stop tilted and then slid behind. The gas station with the bad pump gave us a tired wink and let us pass. When the gate lights rose, they stayed where gates should be. The rain still fell straight. It will do that whether you are a person or paper. I breathed in and out because there was nothing else to do that felt like mine. He parked an intake. He put the van in park with my wrist habit. He cut the engine and left the radio on long enough to hear dispatch say, "Good job." Then he turned the key fully, and everything we did not need fell quiet. Inside, county was warm and smelled like bleach and pencil erasers. The booking officer didn't look up when he took the clipboard. He stamped received at 1:33, and the ink tasted like deja vu. He asked for names the way he always asked for names. The inmates offered their syllables and waited to see which parts county wanted to keep. When it was my turn, the officer glanced at the manifest, slid his finger down the column, and then, without lifting his eyes, wrote Hart, Julian in the inmate box. The line was smooth, practiced. The box had been filled a dozen times with my name in the same hand. Tonight's date printed level, all the numbers squared. He called Deputy Hart, and two of us answered. He did not correct either. It is not his job to tell paper what it has done. The other me signed the escort line and handed the pen back and thanked the officer with my voice. He did not look toward the cage as he left. Outside, the rain kept falling in its perfect vertical discipline. The kind of rain that convinces you up and down are the only directions that matter. The van sat where vans sit when they have successfully carried the right count, and the roomer laid down on the concrete like a plank that wanted to be a bridge. I sleep badly in bright rooms, but county makes its own rules. They put me on a bench to wait for the next box to be initialed. No one rushed. The shackles on my wrists had the warmth of a person who sat here last week and decided to breathe anyway. In the glass of the intake booth, I saw my face in duplicate. One version had already forgotten to be tired. The other watched the rain and counted lines. If you have ever wondered whether manifest ink dries faster on nights like this, it does. It dries instantly, as if it has been dry for years. I won't tell you that screaming would have changed anything. Screaming would have made the glass wobble and the pen hesitate, and then the schedule would have caught its breath and continued. The logbook in the glove box will take another page next week and the week after. If you ride this run someday and think you hear someone breathing where there is no one, you are hearing me, or my brother, or the version of you who counts better than he prays. The cage hum will match your pulse, because that is how paper keeps time. If you're the kind of listener who likes an escape hatch, I can give you a small one. When the other me turned to leave, he glanced through the rain at the windshield and frowned as if the lines were not as straight as before. If I were the type to be hopeful, I would say something learned from the choice we made. If I were cruel, I would tell you it changed nothing. The truth is smaller. It taught the route my name a little more deeply and then kept going. The rumor will stay a rumor because paperwork is polite. If you ever find yourself behind a wheel with a clean manifest and a cage that hums in rain that draws the same lines over your glass no matter how you turn, do me a courtesy. Check the glove box. Touch the stamp. Count the escort lines twice and the faces twice, even if it makes your supervisor impatient. If a voice from the back speaks your name with the middle you don't say, do not brag that it doesn't shake you. And if you unlock the cage, do it because you chose to, not because you waited for paper to make you a line that cannot be erased. And that, my friends, brings us to the end of tonight's ride through 10 disturbing true police horror stories. From lockers that hum with names that shouldn't exist, to time-sick precincts where no clock dares to tick, to transport vans that arrive with one deputy fewer than they left with. Each tale was stitched from the same threads. Order unraveling, routine betraying, paperwork outliving the people who signed it. If you're still here, it means you've survived the echoes, the reflections, and the straight lines of rain. But survival in these stories never really means safe. It just means you've been recorded. And sometimes being recorded is how the story begins. So I'll leave you with this thought. Next time you hear a siren, next time you check the time on a wall, or sign your name to a form, ask yourself, who is keeping the record, and what does it cost them to balance the books? Thank you for joining me tonight. If any one of these stories kept you awake, or worse, followed you into the quiet after the lights go out, let me know which one in the comments. And if you'd like more nights like this, more doors left half open, make sure you subscribe before you forget the hour. Sleep lightly. You never know when your shift actually ends.